I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good afternoon, everybody. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. 4 migrants sadly die in the Channel. A massive search operation is underway. But surely now, more than ever, we need to stop these small boats coming across. But how? There has to be a potent combination of deterrence and smashing these vile human trafficking gangs. Throughout the course of this show, I'll be taking a close look at all the options available. Don't get ill tomorrow, people. The nurses will all be going on strike, apparently. Chief nurses across the UK say they feel let down by the Royal College of Nursing strikes. Union leaders flatly refuse to make sure that cancer operations go ahead. Is public opinion turning against the nurses' union? Should Sunak meet them to help stop these strikes? We also have some good news about the economy, a shocking change in the definition of what a woman is, and yet another Netflix trailer from Harry and Meghan. But make sure you get in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk on the two main topics and all the different angles on them that we're going to be tackling today. Sad migrant deaths in the Channel and, of course, the nurses' strike. I want solutions, not questions. How do we stop these small boats? What needs to be done to stop yet more tragic loss of life? And how do we stop these nurses' strikes? That's GBViews at gbnews.uk. But before that, it's your latest headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. The Home Secretary says today's migrant tragedy shows how important it is to break up criminal gangs and stop channel crossings. 4 people have now died and 43 others were rescued after a small boat capsized in the Channel. The incident comes less than 24 hours after the Prime Minister announced renewed plans to tackle illegal migration. Suella Braverman says new legislation to deter crossings will save lives.
These are the days that we dread.
Crossing the Channel in unseaworthy vessels is a lethally dangerous endeavour. It is for this reason, above all, that we are working so hard to destroy the business model of the people smugglers, evil, organised criminals who treat human beings as cargo.
The Prime Minister has asked the lawyer investigating bullying allegations against Dominic Raab to consider 5 new formal complaints. The Deputy Prime Minister is now facing 8 allegations, all relating to his time at the Ministry of Justice. Mr Raab has previously denied the claims. Labour is calling for his suspension while the investigation is underway. Downing Street is urging the Royal College of Nursing and ambulance workers' unions to protect patient safety during tomorrow's historic NHS strikes. It comes after the Prime Minister defended the government's support for nurses at PMQs. Nursing staff will walk out in England, Wales and Northern Ireland on Thursday unless a deal can be agreed. Mr Sunak says the government has tried to give them the support they need.
Last year, when everyone else in the public sector had a public sector pay freeze, the nurses received a 3% pay rise. When the RCN asked for more in-work training, we gave every nurse and midwife a £1,000 training budget. And when they asked for nurses' bursaries, we made sure that every nursing student received a £5,000 grant. That's because we do work constructively and we will continue to back our nurses.
Well, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the Conservatives can't cope with the current level of industrial action.
After 12 years of Tory failure, winter has arrived for our public services. And we've got a Prime Minister who has curled up in a ball and gone into hibernation. If he can't act on behalf of patients or nurses or everyone who wants these strikes called off, then surely the whole country is entitled to ask, what is the point of him and what is the point of the government he's supposed to be leading?
Around half of Britain's rail lines are closed today as RMT members stage their second day of strikes across the country. Thousands of workers at Network Rail and 14 train companies have walked out, leaving some parts of the country with no train service at all. It's part of a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. It comes after the RMT rejected an offer of a 5% pay rise this year with another 4% next year. 6 Chinese officials, including the Consul General, have been removed from the UK over an incident involving a Hong Kong pro-democracy protester. Bob Chan was demonstrating on the grounds of the consulate in Manchester when he was attacked in October. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says the government has made it clear that China must take action against the diplomats.
Greater Manchester Police initiated an investigation. As part of that investigation, requested that 6 Chinese officials waive diplomatic immunity so they could be questioned. We informed the Chinese embassy of that, and we set a deadline which expired today, making it clear that we expected them to take action.
Inflation has fallen to 10.7%, down from 11.1% in October. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says getting inflation down is his top priority and plans are in place to reduce it by half. Despite the fall, Labour says the figure is still too high and shows the weakness of the economy. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says high inflation is still worrying working people. And we'll bring you that sort in just a moment.
With inflation still in double digits, it's obviously very concerning for families. Just in the lead up to Christmas, which is supposed to be a special time for families, I know that many mums and dads are going to be worrying about how they're going to heat their homes, whether they can afford the Christmas presents, the Christmas dinner that they had hoped to for their families. Now, the Chancellor will say this is all about global issues, but the truth is the UK is uniquely exposed, whether it's on inflation or economic growth.
And a man who murdered a law graduate refused to leave his cell for sentencing this morning. The court's been told that Jordan McSweeney, who admitted killing Zara Alina in East London, doesn't want to watch video evidence of his actions. He was caught on CCTV following at least 2 other women before attacking the 35-year-old as she walked home from a night out in Ilford. He's due to be sentenced shortly. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get straight back to Patrick.
Welcome back, everybody. Let's get stuck straight into our big story right across the show today, and that is, as things currently stand, 4 people have sadly died and 43 have been rescued after a small boat capsized in the English Channel. The Royal Navy, the French Navy, the Coast Guard and lifeboats have all been involved in that rescue operation off the Kent coast. Home Secretary Suella Braverman told the House of Commons of her profound sadness at hearing of the incident and emphasised the need to push forward with proposed legislation to stop people smugglers exploiting the route across the Channel. But the incident comes less than 24 hours after Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced renewed plans to tackle illegal migration, insisting we have to stop these small boats. And it's on that, really. The timing of this could not be more awful. And just to whiz you through a couple of the things that Rishi Sunak said yesterday that obviously bear significant relevance into what's been going on today. The migrant crossings so far this year, 44,685. Those are the Channel crossings. That is so far in 2022. It is record numbers. It seemed for a while, didn't it? Like pretty much every single week we were dealing with record numbers. Those figures are as of the 12th of December. This includes 1,088 small boats, many carrying between 30 and 50 people. This is in comparison to 28,526 illegal Channel crossings in 2021. So a massive upturn there, we can all see that. And 8,466 in 2020, which seems like a heck of a long time ago now, doesn't it? Rishi Sunak, for his part in it, has decided that one of the ways that he wants to combat this is to have more patrols in the Channel. That's been called a task force. Exactly how long it will take to get that into action remains to be seen. We already know that we've given rather a lot of money to the French, and we'll have British Border Force staff stationed at French command centres as well, watching proceedings unfold. We're going to have Border Force staff at an airport in Albania to monitor the situation there. He also said, of course, as well, that he wants to clear this asylum backlog by the end of next year, so pretty much by this time next year. How obtainable is that? Serious scepticism there, but it's opened up now, hasn't it, yet again, for very tragic reasons, just to fill you in, that the number currently stands at 4 sad deaths in the Channel. Several different offshoots that we're going to be talking about throughout the course of this show, and that I really want your help to discuss as well. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Massive questions raised yet again as to whether or not we should be pulling out of the ECHR. Would that make it easier to add the deterrent element to our pronged approach to what's going on in the Channel, i.e. deportation? But also, what can be done? What more can be done to tackle these depraved, vile human trafficking gangs? And frankly, as well, stop the supply of the small boats. Just if, we can stop the small boats even reaching Calais, presumably that would help to reduce the numbers as well. The emails already coming in on this. Let's keep them coming. gbviews at gbnews.uk. But let's get the very latest now from our Home and Security editor, Mark White, who's stationed in Dover for us. Mark, what is the very latest then?
Well, that air and sea rescue operation is still underway, searching for any signs of anyone else who may still be in the water. But we've only got about an hour maximum of light left here, and once that light goes, I think we're probably looking at that search and rescue operation being very scaled back, if not called off altogether, because quite frankly anyone that's been in the water for this length of time is not going to be surviving anyway, any more than about an hour in the water, and you're really in great difficulty. So we know that 4 people have sadly died as a result of that boat getting into difficulties around about 3 a.m. this morning. 43 others who were rescued, 30 of them were in the water. Now, a local fishing boat was not too far away at the time and managed to get a number of people on board the fishing boat. Then, of course, the lifeboats got out there, and Border Force vessels as well as the Royal Navy and French assets. But, of course, they took longer to get there. They're coming from further afield. By the time they get scrambled and get out there, you're talking about a considerable time that some of these people will have been in the water. And we know that the hospital, the main trauma centre in Ashford, was put on standby to receive some of those who were taken ashore here and transferred onto waiting land ambulances. As well as that, the air ambulance was here, Coast Guard helicopters, all involved in shuttling delivering some of those to local area hospitals. So at this stage, the fatality rate is 4, but there is, of course, always a possibility that that could rise further.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Mark, it was Prime Minister's questions today. Now, Keir Starmer decided to go in, mostly anyway, on strikes, but then Suella Braverman gave her statement on the latest as it stood a couple of hours ago. You filled us in on that now. The conversation, as much of a tragedy as this is, and people are still coming to terms with that, does also put into sharp focus exactly how these people are being brought across the channel. And one area I would like to ask you to comment on, really, is the boats. Now, there is a few diagrams of these kind of boats flowing around the internet at the moment. They're around 7 metres long, for example. Compare this to a container ship that's around 366 metres, which I think puts it into sharp perspective. But a lot of people are seriously questioning, how on earth are so many of these boats readily available, Mark? Is it really such a difficult job to try to stop the supply of these boats?
Well, it seems to be, yes. They do have some successes. Authorities in Europe, the National Crime Agency here in the UK. So from time to time, you hear about a major operation to smash a people smuggling ring that often results in the seizure of a number of assets, including boats and outboard motors, life jackets and the like. The fact is, the people smugglers have become much more sophisticated. This is a multi-million pound endeavour. On any given date, they're charging at least £3,000 a head when you're then filling a boat with up to 50 people on board a boat. You're sending half a dozen or more boats across in good weather. You can see just how lucrative it is. And when this operation started about 3 years ago, Patrick, in 2018, so 4 years ago now, it was a trickle to begin with, and they were using very small boats, dinghies really, that had no more than half a dozen people on board. But over the course of a year or two, the vessels got slowly but surely bigger as the people smugglers managed to get supply chains to people willing to supply them these vessels. Now what we have are much larger vessels, as you say, 7 metres or more long, that can carry up to 40, 50 people. I wouldn't say easily, they're crammed on these vessels. Now, these are made to order in China, and then they're sent from China to Turkey. From Turkey, they're transported by road by the criminal gangs to Germany, to other European countries, where they are then stored in warehouses, lockups that the criminal gangs have, and when they're needed, they're sent, of course, to the beaches of Normandy, where they're assembled, and they're hidden in the dunes, and then they're sent down to the beaches to make that journey across the channel. As I say, they're much more sophisticated now, Patrick, than they were. They've got good supply chains, but every now and again, those supply chains get interrupted. And just one final point on that. That was brought home to us actually about a week ago. I did a little bit of reporting around the fact that the people smugglers on 2 or 3 of the vessels were, instead of using life jackets, resorting back to a tactic they used very early on in the small boats crisis of using inner tube tyre inner tubes, which are of course not ideal at all, and it's very difficult to hold on to that in very cold waters, but that clearly was as a result of the supply chain probably being interrupted by law enforcement activity.
Mark, just very, very quickly and finally, I'm shortly going to be going to Conservative MPs to discuss the political elements to all of this in light of the things that Rishi Sunak had to say yesterday about his new plan. I'm also then going to be talking to a military expert, talk about maybe the ways we can deploy our military to try to crack down on the actual human trafficking gangs themselves. But Mark, I know you're very plugged in both on this side of the channel and on the other side of the channel. Do you expect to see any pausing whatsoever in boats coming across as a result of this? Will people waiting at Calais to get on these boats even be aware of this, maybe?
I'm sure they probably are aware we're all interconnected now, and of course the migrants are interconnected as well. They have their mobile phones, although they're instructed to throw them in the drink when they're halfway across the channel, because they are not supposed to have anything that can identify them for authorities here, to make it more difficult to get a handle on where they're from, and perhaps more likely that they'll eventually be granted leave to remain in this country. So they'll probably know about what's happened. But you're right, it's not going to be a deterrent at all. It really isn't. Individual tragedies are a tragedy, but, you know, they're taking a risk. They've taken a risk in crossing the Mediterranean to get to Europe, to come through all the countries that they have done to get up to Normandy. They're willing, of course, to take that final risk across the Channel, and it might mean, you know, for some, it ends in tragedy. But we saw a tragedy 13 months ago. 27 people died. It did nothing at all to deter it. In fact, the number crossing this year is almost double what it was last year.
Mark White, thank you very much, our Home and Security Editor, who will be keeping us abreast of that ongoing and breaking situation taking place in the Channel. Sadly, 4 people so far have died, 40 others rescued. I can go now to Conservative MP for Dover, Natalie Elphick. Natalie, I really appreciate you taking the time for us. I'm standing out there in what appears to be sub-zero temperatures in Westminster. Goodness only knows what it must be like currently in the Channel. We heard from Mark White there, our Home and Security Editor, who said that the sad deaths of people will not act as a deterrent for those still waiting in Calais to come across the Channel. What will act as a deterrent, one would imagine, is the actual threat of deportation and the very real action when it comes to deportation. Do you believe that Rishi Sunak and his plan that was announced yesterday will result in more deportations, or do you think it's just more hot air?
Well, first let me say how my thoughts and prayers are with all of those affected by that tragedy, and the people who died and the people who are still in hospital, and also put on record my thanks to the amazing response from the first responders from my constituency in Dover and Deal. In relation to the announcement from the Prime Minister yesterday, I think what we saw is him taking that personal responsibility for tackling this issue, and he set out a number of things in relation to deportations in particular that you mentioned. Clearly the Albanian deal was the big news there, the high number of people from Albania who have been coming in recent months. But I spoke to the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary yesterday. I've said it again in Parliament today. I think key to stopping the small boats is making sure that those boats don't leave France, and that there is a joint security patrol across the Channel between our two countries. That would bring an end to the small boats crossings, and that's why the Prime Minister needs to meet with President Macron soonest.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are very, very frustrated by the fact that at least the optics of it, we seem to be giving a lot of money to the French, not getting a lot back in return. But Rishi Sunak said something yesterday that I thought he may come to live or die by, actually, which is the desire to clear the asylum seeker backlog by, roughly speaking, this time next year. That backlog stands between 90 and 110,000 from the figures that I can gather. If he doesn't manage to do that, does he have to go?
Well, I think, you know, what we've seen are these numbers of people coming over increase and increase and increase, and that's put massive pressure on local services in Kent and in Dover, on housing, on a whole range of local services. It's put pressure on the Home Office as well. But I was really shocked to hear that at the moment some Home Office caseworkers are clearing cases at the rate of 1 a week, which is clearly not the way to clear a backlog. So I think it's absolutely right to identify that more needs to be done. But the bottom line is we've known for a long time that once you get here, your chances are that you'll stay here, and that's what we need to change. That's why these new laws that he announced are going to be important as they come through in the new year. But in the meantime, in my constituency, we can't wait, because day after day I'm worrying, my constituents in Dover and Deal are worrying, my community is worrying. We'll get more calls like the one I had in the early hours of the morning saying they were bringing bodies into Dover.
Yeah, indeed. Now, as long as we have the geography, which we always will, of the Channel, we are realistically the only country now that will be dealing with migrant deaths in the water. Unfortunately, that looks like it's not going to stop until the boats stop. And the one way that maybe this migrant crisis can properly be sorted once and for all is if we cut the head off the snake when it comes to these human trafficking gangs. We keep hearing, don't we, that we have the best special forces in the world, that we're the best trained in the world. Would you support Britain leading the way when it comes to us tackling these human trafficking gangs and get our boys abroad and cut the head off that snake?
Well, I've long said that we need to have British officers working in France on the beaches, as well as in the intelligence centres and in all of the different places, all the security areas that are involved with this issue. But the bottom line is this is organised criminality, and we've just heard that, you know, people are able to describe step by step what's happening. Well, if they can describe step by step what's happening and do so very well, as your correspondent did, then actually why can't this be tackled and stopped? And that is the straightforward thing that we need to really concentrate on, tackling the gangs operating in northern France and making sure those boats don't get in the water in the first place.
Is it not the humanitarian thing to do now to actually stop these boats?
I've said for a long time that the absolutely moral and responsible thing to do is to stop the boats. People are put at risk in these conditions, in these incredibly treacherous conditions in the winter, but actually the channel is dangerous every single day of the year. These boats are completely unseaworthy, and France should be stopping them and also stopping them in their waters instead of shepherding them over the Meridian line. Because what I understand happened in the early hours of this morning is that this second tragedy that we've had was again around that really deep zone of the Meridian line. That's why we need this Channel Joint Security Zone to really stop this once and for all and save lives.
Well, I think we all would like the French to maybe step up and do a little bit more when it comes to all of that. But just something that might be a bit unpalatable for the Conservative Party, but something that is necessary. As long as people are able to say, well, there are no real, proper, easy, safe and legal routes to apply for asylum, then people do have to start making journeys, if they so wish, like the ones across the Channel. That can result in death. Is it something the Conservative Party is just going to have to hold their nose and bear, that they're going to have to tell their voters, they're going to have to tell the public, they're going to have to tell the Tory members, we are setting up more safe and legal routes so that we can stop people coming across the Channel?
Well, we have safe and legal routes. Indeed, you know, as the Prime Minister said yesterday, more humanitarian visas have been issued than since the Second World War. We've had 450,000 humanitarian visas issued, in addition to work visas and student visas and so on. There are plenty of legal and safe ways to apply to come to the UK, and that's what we need to be making sure the message is out across the globe. Don't take these dangerous routes. Don't put your lives in the hands of these criminal gangs. Keep safe, apply the legal way, and actually hundreds of thousands of people do, and they come to Britain in the right way. This is illegal, organised criminality, and we must make sure it's brought to an end.
Just very quickly, I thought it was interesting that Rishi Sunak himself made the statement yesterday and not the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. She was just left to clean up the mess that has occurred, sadly, overnight and to deal with the tragedy. Do you think there's a little bit of a power struggle going on there? Does he want to try to take ownership of this so that he can take credit for it if it works and not her?
Well, I think this is a major challenge facing the country, and that the Prime Minister should be taking responsibility for it, as he is. At the end of the day, the solution, I think the key to solving it lies with him, in him having that summit with President Macron and agreeing a new and fresh approach. I met with the Prime Minister and with the Home Secretary together. I think they're both determined on this, but I want to see, for my area of Dover and Deal, an end to this, and I want to make sure that we're saving lives at sea, not having phone calls like today where we're bringing bodies in from the sea.
Natalie, thank you very much. I do appreciate your time. Natalie Elphicke, they're the Conservative MP for Dover. Right, you are with me, Patrick Christys. Coming up, China has removed 6 officials from Britain, including one of its most senior UK diplomats. That's 2 months after violence at its consulate. We'll have the latest on all of that. And, of course, the nurses' strikes as well. Should Rishi Sunak meet with them to try to stop them? What's your take? GBViews at gbnews.uk.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. Now, for the remainder of this hour and indeed throughout the course of the show, I'll be bringing you up to date on the latest tragedy that's taken place in the Channel. Also, the latest on the nursing strikes, as a lot of the UK's top nursing chiefs are desperately urging the Royal College of Nursing to withdraw its strike action because they say that patients will be badly affected. Lots of views coming in on that. GBviews at gbnews.uk, and I promise I will get your views on that shortly, because I've been asking for solutions to both of those issues, the Channel crisis and the nurses' strike, and lots of you have come up with some rather good ones, so we'll go to those shortly. But before that, China has removed 6 officials from Britain who are wanted for police questioning. That's in relation to the assault of a protester outside the nation's consulate in Manchester. Greater Manchester Police wanted to interview Consul General Zheng Jian and 5 of his staff over the attack in October. The Foreign Secretary James Cleverly has said that he is disappointed that the individuals will not face justice over the attack and has outlined the events which have led to this point.
Greater Manchester Police initiated an investigation. As part of that investigation, requested that 6 Chinese officials waive diplomatic immunity so they could be questioned. We informed the Chinese embassy of that, and we set a deadline which expired today, making it clear that we expected them to take action.
Well, GB News' political reporter Catherine Forster is with me in the studio now, and you have the latest on these developments.
Yes, so Bob Chen was a Hong Kong pro-democracy protester and he was badly assaulted in the grounds of the Chinese consul building in Manchester back in mid-October. The police requested to interview the consul general and 5 others. The government set a deadline of today for a decision on that, whether they would waive diplomatic immunity. But they haven't done so, not surprisingly, really, because they don't have to, because they're diplomats, so normal rules do not apply to them. But what has happened is that those diplomats have now either left the UK and gone back to China, or there's 1 or 2 of them that are still to travel back. And it has been made clear that their diplomatic careers in the UK are well and truly over. They will not be coming back. Their careers are finished here, if not elsewhere.
OK, all right. So it's quite an interesting geopolitical development, potentially, and one that no doubt the Chinese government will not react particularly well to.
Yeah, so there's been a mixed response from Conservative MPs as well. Ian Duncan-Smith, who's obviously a real China hawk, has said that they should have been kicked out weeks ago. Alicia Cairns, who's chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, have said that they've fled like cowards. But of course, it is difficult because we are incredibly integrated with China. They've loaned us vast amounts of money. They're embedded in our infrastructure, in our companies. So clearly the government are taking a tougher line with China, but still have to tread a little bit carefully.
Well, exactly that. Look, thank you very, very much, Catherine Forster there. With you know the latest developments when it comes to a variety of different Chinese diplomats. Anyway, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Posties joined the strike today, with communication workers walking out on the same day as RMT rail staff. Rail workers from the union are set to walk out again on Friday, Saturday, and over Christmas. Oh, yeah, and New Year as well. We're going to be speaking to the Independent's travel editor Simon Calder for the latest. I am also going to be discussing the latest developments when it comes to the nurses' strike as well. Should Sunak meet the nurses to try to call it off? And as well, do you think that patient safety is being compromised in an unacceptable way? Your solutions to this particular crisis, ladies and gents, GBViews at gbnews.uk. Do we negotiate? Do we give them exactly what we want? Or does the government stand firm? But before that, it's your latest headlines.
3:33, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The Home Secretary says today's migrant tragedy shows how important it is to break up criminal gangs and stop channel crossings. 4 people have died and 43 others were rescued after a small boat capsized in the channel. The incident comes less than 24 hours after the Prime Minister announced renewed plans to tackle illegal migration. Suella Braverman says new legislation to deter crossings will save lives.
These are the days that we dread. Crossing the Channel in unseaworthy vessels is a lethally dangerous endeavour. It is for this reason, above all, that we are working so hard to destroy the business model of the people smugglers, evil, organised criminals who treat human beings as cargo.
The Prime Minister has asked the lawyer investigating bullying allegations against Dominic Raab to consider 5 new formal complaints. The Deputy Prime Minister is now facing 8 allegations, all relating to his time at the Ministry of Justice. Mr Raab has previously denied the claims. Labour is calling for his suspension while the investigation is underway. A man who murdered a law graduate refused to leave his cell for sentencing this morning. Court's been told that Jordan McSweeney, who admitted killing Zara Alina in East London, doesn't want to watch video evidence of his actions. He was caught on CCTV following at least 2 other women before attacking the 35-year-old as she walked home from a night out in Ilford. He's due to be sentenced shortly. 6 Chinese officials, including the Consul General, have been removed from the UK over an incident involving a Hong Kong pro-democracy protester. Bob Chan was demonstrating on the grounds of the consulate in Manchester when he was attacked in October. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, says the government made it clear that China must take action against the diplomats. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're watching the People's Channel, GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be back in just a moment. Let's get a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2392, €1.1631 euros. Price of gold starting at £1,460, 53 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,488 points.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, well, we are indeed the People's Channel. I do love to hear from the people. I've been asking loads of you to get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, on solutions to, well, two things. But I'm dealing with just one of them now, which is what's been going on in the channel. Very, very tragically, 4 people lost their lives after a small boat capsized in the channel. Some 40 or so others have been rescued. We'll bring you updates on that throughout the course of this show. But a lot of you have been getting in touch about how we can really stop this now in the wake of Rishi Sunak's announcement yesterday that he's got a plan that includes things like greater deportations, cutting the asylum backlog, more task forces in the channel. We all know the drill. Geraldine says that while she has a huge amount of sympathy, of course, to anyone who has lost their lives or suffered in the channel, she does feel as though they're being aided and abetted by things like the ECHR. Well, Geraldine, we've got a debate coming up on whether or not we should pull out of the ECHR. I suppose that really does mean taking back control of our laws, or does it? Clive says the military. As he says he's mentioned before that these gangs, the human trafficking gangs, will have guns, they'll be armed, they'll be very well equipped. We have to basically, I'm paraphrasing here, Clive, but he says we have to swallow the fact that we send in special forces and accept the fact that there will be casualties as a result. The casualties there, of course, being, fingers crossed anyway, those vile human traffickers. So he's up for sending the military in. Gavin says, Patrick, with regard to the current migrant crisis, we do need someone in power with some actual backbone. So he's calling for more of a political solution there. Although, to be fair, his political solution is Donald Trump. So strong views on that side. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We'll keep you up to date on all of that. Very, very sad loss of life in the channel, crystallising, I think, arguably more so than ever, the fact that something really does need to be done to try to stop these boats coming across. Very shortly, I'm going to be talking about the nurses' strike. Strong views on that as well. But before that, more strikes. The TSSA union has announced fresh strikes at 2 train operators in the days after Christmas. So 700 TSSA members at West Midlands Trains and Great Western Railway will strike for 24 hours from noon on December the 28th. It comes on the second day of a series of walkouts planned by the RMT union, due to run through until after the new year. Right, there's a lot going on here. There's loads of different unions. There's loads of different strike dates. I will forgive you for not being able to keep up with it. To be honest with you, I wouldn't be able to keep up with it if my job wasn't to read it there off an auto cue. Joining me now is the travel editor of The Independent, Simon Calder, a man in the know. Simon, what the heck is going on?
Well, OK, it's very complicated, but the main thing is if you are a rail passenger or indeed a taxpayer who's bankrolling this whole miserable business, then you will be getting increasingly cheesed off. Let's just pick up on those strikes. Yes. Now, the TSSA, white-collar union, generally more moderate than the RMT union and indeed the ASLEF train drivers union, but they're obviously fed up, and they are going on strike between Christmas and New Year. Frankly, a lot of your viewers are going to be saying, I didn't know there were any trains anyway, because obviously this coincides with the festive engineering works that are going ahead. It will make it almost pretty much continuous kind of line of industrial action all the way through to second week in January on the railways. I'm not sure how much effect that will have on those 2 train operators. I would say they won't shut them down. However, we are on day 2 of a national rail strike. And you might be thinking, oh, it's a 2-day strike, so I'll be back on the trains tomorrow. Watch out. There's lots of disruption expected for tomorrow as well, because lots of staff who were perhaps due to work overnight won't be, and therefore things will be slow starting up in the morning. And they'll also start closing down tomorrow evening ahead of the next 48-hour strike. And this is so complicated that in Scotland, ScotRail have basically just said, all week we're just going to assume there's a strike, so we do a few trains around Glasgow, around Edinburgh, and that's it.
Yes, indeed. Now, something that might seem slightly self-defeating as far as the Mick Lynch and the RMTs of this world are concerned is that, as we understand it, his members' strike action is going to cost them around £5,000. This is according to reports. You seem like that might not be true.
Look, it all depends. It's difficult to say. So they will...
Well, he couldn't say it quite famously on Radio 4 yesterday, and he got a bit leery.
So it all depends. If, for example, you are a relatively high-earning person belonging to the RMT and working for either Network Rail or a train operator, and you were used to doing lots of overtime, then, well, you could have, in theory, lost a maximum of, by the time we get to the end of this, 16 days' work and untold amounts of overtime as well. So for a number of people, it will be into the thousands. I'd probably say somewhere between £1,000 and £1,500 is probably the kind of average, but I mean, it's a significant amount of money, and you've got to, you've been on strike and you want to win that back.
Well, that's it, and I think as well, obviously, one thing I was alluding to was whether or not the government is deciding that actually public opinion may now be turning against the people who are going on strike, and also how long can they stay on strike for if they're losing that kind of money. But your advice to people, just very briefly, who are using the trains right across the UK would be, what, stay home if you can?
No. I mean, there are going to be trains running all the way through, apart from Christmas and Boxing Day, when they never run anyway. Just check in advance if your train is running. For instance, if you were hoping to travel from Scotland to London today, well, I'm afraid you've missed that by a couple of hours.
Yes, indeed. All right, Simon, thank you very much. As ever, Simon Calder there, The Independent Travel editor, right, OK. Well, from one strike to another, the Royal College of Nurses has rejected calls from NHS bosses to protect urgent cancer surgery during industrial action, which begins tomorrow. Now, this really, I think, of all of the strikes, and there are, of course, loads of them, possibly the most emotive. Why? Well, because it means the health of the nation, the health of your nan, the health of your mum, your dad or yourself as well, and cancer patients. Well, the union has said that it will only staff emergency cancer services, such as chemotherapy or immediate life-saving operations. But realistically, that's a bit of a grey area, isn't it, when it comes to cancer surgery? But operations removing tumours or other cancer-related surgeries will not be covered. And I just wanted, before I go to my guest, to hit you with a couple of stats here, really, because the chief nurses of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have written to the Nurses Union boss, that's the RCN, the Royal College of Nursing, saying that they feel let down by the union. And the Prime Minister referenced the fact in Prime Minister's questions that, in fact, it's almost unbelievable. You don't hear this very often. I think we should maybe be hearing it a bit more. That apparently, anyway, the NHS has had, in real terms, a 39% funding uplift compared to 2010. That takes it to £180.2 billion for this coming year. And as I introduce my guest now, Dr Lawrence Buttman, former chairman of the British Medical Association GPs Committee, it leads me, Dr Lawrence, to the question as to whether or not this is actually a problem of government or a problem of NHS management.
Well, it's a problem for somebody. It's a problem for the nurses who feel they've got no other way to increase their income but to go on strike, something which I'm sure none of them are enthusiastic about. And it's also a problem for the Treasury, who have to foot the bill. Unfortunately, my experience of Treasury is that they're never very forthcoming. And so they use this smokescreen of a review body, an independent review body, which, although it's technically independent, of course, is paid by the government, as am I. And they pronounce whatever they think the pay rise should be, and then they tell the government, and then the government decides what it wants to do. And so I think this is a problem for the government, not for the NHS.
Well, I'll tell you who it definitely is a problem for, and that is patients. And I think a lot of people will see through, frankly, the guff, as I would call it, of the Royal College of Nursing to say that, well, actually, it won't really massively impact patient health. Well, it obviously will. And for somebody who is awaiting to have a tumour removed, they will be shocked to learn that, according to the NHS, their operation is not vital. And it calls into question, again, the morality of these strikes.
Well, you can argue, if you start looking at morality, we can start trading immoralities both within and outside the NHS and in society as a whole, when somebody's paid more than somebody else for doing similar work, all sorts of things. So I feel that we shouldn't be arguing on that basis. I don't like the idea of anybody going on strike in the health service that affects patients. However, I understand why nurses feel the way they do. They are very badly paid, and they need a significant pay rise, unfortunately, to get them out of the position where some of them are now going to food banks. That isn't a good idea either. They're now falling into the working poor. That doesn't mean, of course, that cancer patients should be penalised in any way. Clearly, emergency services have to be maintained. But that's up to the Royal College of Nurses, how they choose to operate their industrial action.
But the fact is, of course, there is no political support for these strikes on either side of the House. And in fact, Rishi Sunak today did call out Keir Starmer on that and said, essentially, get off the fence. I'm paraphrasing, get off the fence. Do you support them or do you not support them? One thing that Keir Starmer was saying is, though, why won't Rishi Sunak actually meet with the Royal College of Nursing? Apparently, they have said that if Rishi Sunak confirms he will enter into discussions with them, then they will call these strikes off. The clock is ticking. Should he just meet with them, even if it's just to delay these strikes?
Well, it sets a precedent, as he would see it. As I would see it, it's a sensible manoeuvre because in the game of political negotiations, it's a lot better for each side to trade directly with the organ grinder rather than the monkey. So if he would do that, it therefore puts him in a better position for dealing with them, and it also shows their members that they've got the Prime Minister to wake up and pay attention.
It's all, all right. Just lastly, it's all very well and good saying that nurses aren't paid enough for the job that they do, but the fact is that a lot of the people that they treat who rely on the NHS, they can't afford to go private, and a lot of those will be working poor or just poor themselves. How on earth does a nurse justify looking at someone of those in the eye, as and when they do get back to work, and saying, we're very sorry we didn't remove that tumour, but we don't feel like we've been paid enough, when we have had 2 pay rises in 2 years, even though those pay rises are not in line with inflation, frankly, unlike anyone else's, really.
Yes, I think any patient who feels ill-served, understandably, is going to be very miffed that they've...
It's medical negligence, isn't it?
I think it's very unfortunate that their treatment will be delayed by probably only a day or 2. You'd have to ask them what the nurses think they're going to do, how they define urgent and emergency cancer care. You could argue, as you're trying to do, that actually any cancer care is urgent, but the nurses obviously have their view, which is slightly different to yours.
OK. Lawrence, thank you very much. Dr Lawrence Buckman there, former chairman of the British Medical Association GPs Committee. We're going to be discussing that throughout the show. Look, so far this hour, we've kind of set our stall out for the remainder of the show, haven't we? Our main stories are, of course, what's been going on in the Channel, the various different strike action that's taking place on your railways, but really also, certainly the main strike action that I'm going to be focusing on, because it's just around the corner, it's just tomorrow, is that nurses one, and it's been announced as well that actually there will be more cancer treatments cancelled than initially first thought. And does that change your mind on it? I have been asking throughout the course of this for solutions to both of the 2 major problems that we're going to be talking about here. What goes on in terms of stopping the small boats crossing the Channel in light of, yet again, some more tragic deaths in the Channel, but also what could be done to try to stop the nurses' strikes. And actually, Gemma has been on, and this is an interesting one, a question that I think is going to rear its head as these strikes continue, especially considering there's no political support, at least openly, on either side of the House for these strikes, which leads me to conclude that actually it wouldn't be sorted no matter who was in charge. Gemma says that she thinks these strikes should be illegal, and I wonder whether or not these questions are going to keep being asked, whether or not it should be legal for nurses to strike. GB Views at GBnews.uk. Well, in the last hour, King Charles III visited the Palace of Westminster. He unveiled a plaque in Westminster Hall and switched on a Platinum Jubilee gift from members of both houses. Simultaneously, Netflix has released the trailer for the second set of Harry and Meghan episodes. We'll get more on that from our royal reporter, Cameron Walker. But, it's not, they're making me sit through more of it. Oh, here it is.
I've certainly seen evidence that there was negative briefing from the palace against Harry and Meghan to suit other people's agendas.
You would just see it play out. Like a story about someone in the family would pop up for a minute, and they go, we gotta make that go away. But there's real estate on a website homepage. There is real estate there on a newspaper front cover, and something has to be filled in there about someone royal.
Well, clearly the best thing to do about that is to try to do a global interview with Oprah, followed by a Netflix documentary series, followed by a book, and to continue to keep this story going. We would not now be talking about this if they weren't piping up all the time. With me now from Westminster is GB News' royal reporter, Cameron Walker. Cameron, thank you very much. Yes, so, OK, what should we start with? Should we start with King Charles first, actually?
Yeah, let's talk about that. It's nice to start talking about that rather than Harry and Meghan for a second. Yes, so usually I'm at Buckingham Palace, aren't I, as the royal reporter? But today I'm here at the Palace of Westminster. The royal standard has just come down, indicating that His Majesty has now left the Houses of Parliament. He was here mainly to be in Westminster Hall to unveil a plaque which marks the spot that the late Queen Elizabeth II laid in state in September following her death. So that was the main reason why he was here. He also met with MPs, including the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, Leader of the Opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, and the Leader of the House, Lindsay Hoyle. He also met with a number of staff members who helped the more than 200,000 people who queued for hours to pay their final respects to the late Queen Elizabeth II as she lied in state here at Westminster Hall. And then following that, he went into New Palace Yard, where he unveiled a privately paid for gift by parliamentarians from both houses, as you said, Patrick. And it was mainly, the gift was for the late Queen to mark her Platinum Jubilee, 70 years of service to this country. And it's a pair of unique bronze sculptured lamps, which apparently is a tradition, featuring heraldic beasts from the UK. But all of this, I'm afraid, Patrick, comes as a new trailer for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's documentary series is released, which a lawyer in that trailer alleges that Buckingham Palace was briefing negative stories about Harry and Meghan to the press in order to, what's alluded to in this trailer, make other members of the royal family look good. There's been no comments from Buckingham Palace or Kensington Palace on this, and of course the actual Netflix documentary, the final 3 episodes, are released tomorrow, which just so happens to coincide with another event happening in Westminster, that of the Princess of Wales Carol service, where members of the royal family, including the King and Queen consorts, will be here, perhaps a show of unity in the wake of the Sussex storm that's on the horizon, Patrick.
Cameron, thank you very much, as ever. Yes, outside a very different palace for us this time, but doing stellar work nonetheless. Cameron Walker there, GB News' royal reporter, initially on whatever the King has been up to, followed by, of course, that news that there is yet another Netflix trailer. Thank you very much, everybody who has been emailing in. As ever, I do like to get as many of you on the channel as possible, whether that's via the medium of email or indeed seeing your wonderful and lovely faces. And today is no different, because in the next hour, I have yet more GB News viewers who are going to find themselves on the telly. So keep these emails coming in, and that could be you as well. gbviews@gbnews.uk. I'm asking for solutions today. Solutions to the migrant crisis and what's been going on in the channel. Sad deaths, of course, of 4 people there so far. And the solutions to what's been going on with the nurses' strike. Like Helen, for example. Helen's solution to the nurses' strike is to, well, ban all of the unions. I mean, it's an extreme solution, but it's one nonetheless. Keep these views coming in, ladies and gentlemen. I'll have all of today's big topics when I return very, very shortly. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. More cold and frosty weather to come through the rest of this week. There are signs of a change as we go through the weekend. Still icy and, in places, still some snow falling. This area of low pressure never quite made it in. That's got some warm air, but it's not heading towards us. We've still got the northerly winds bringing more snow showers across northern Scotland, although the winds are now easing just a little bit, particularly across Shetland. But with more snow showers coming in here, a mixture of rain, sleet and snow showers for Northern Ireland and eastern England. Could turn icy as we go through the evening and overnight. So we do have Met Office yellow weather warnings in place. For the vast majority, it is simply clear and cold. Temperatures dropping well below freezing, even in towns and cities. And where there's any snow lying on the ground across Scotland, well, we could get down to -10 to -13. And there will be more snow showers coming in across northern Scotland. Hit and miss, but a few more centimetres likely in places. More than that over hills. And during the course of tomorrow, a few more of these wintry showers coming into parts of northeast England. So again, a covering of snow is possible in places, particularly over the North York Moors. Same goes for northern parts of Northern Ireland. Elsewhere, most places, simply dry and sunny and cold, with temperatures struggling to get much above freezing during the day, and quickly through the evening, as soon as the sun sets, temperatures dropping, and we'll see another hard frost forming. Still a few wintry showers across eastern England and across northern Scotland, so it could turn icy, but a bit of a shift as we go through tomorrow evening. Weather coming in from the northwest. That will bring snow to the Highlands and potentially through the central belt of Scotland for a time during Friday. So again, Met Office yellow warnings in place for that. Something we need to keep a close eye on during Friday. Could be a bit of a mixture through the central belt of rain, sleet or snowfall. Mostly rain across Northern Ireland with some snow on the hills. So a bit of a change, and then more of a change for Sunday as we see things turning wetter, but also quite a bit milder.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Welcome back, everybody. It's 2 minutes past 4. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. And coming up, Labour says that action against people smuggling gangs has been too weak and that more should be done before further lives are lost in the English Channel. That, of course, comes as our big breaking story today, that 4 people have died as a small boat capsized in the Channel. We will bring you the very latest on that from the scene, actually. Tomorrow is a day to avoid the hospital, let's be perfectly honest with you, because nurses will be on strike. During PMQs earlier. OK, all right, well, there we go. We've been interrupted. We'll take you live to the Old Bailey now for the sentencing of Jordan McSweeney, who admitted killing Zara Alina in East London in June. Let's go live to the Old Bailey.
Were entirely the opposite of his. She had studied law onto the solicitor's role. Miss Alina's aunt, Farah Naz, and her grandmother, Rashda Parveen, have told the court in articulate, elegant and moving terms how precious and special the woman this defendant sexually assaulted and murdered was. Every human being has her own essential qualities. Zara believed in justice. She had a strong moral compass. She filled her life with big ideas, big plans, and a zest for existence. She was confident and active, working and volunteering to use her talents to the full. She was well loved, her mother's only child, and her death has broken that woman. Zara's absence is being felt constantly by the entire family, the extended family. The light has gone out from their lives, they have told the court. They will campaign for a better world in her name. For the life she lost, having done nothing wrong, they want to make the world safer for others. The defendant had been drinking that night with the friend whose caravan he was sharing. He was pestering women. He groped a woman at the Great Spoon of Ilford and tried to molest a female member of staff. Eventually, he was ejected just after 11 p.m. He walked off in the direction of Cranbrook Road and for the next 2 hours prowled around desperate to find a victim. He was captured just after midnight, obviously intoxicated, and following a woman, a stranger, down Romford Road. He deployed some degree of subterfuge, waiting to get her in front and falling behind when she appeared to notice him. The woman may well have realised he was following her because, wisely, she entered a shop and showed her wariness by looking backwards towards the doorway. Indeed, he hung around outside that shop, waiting for her to leave. He entered and left without making any purchase. She watched him leave and waited yet more time before leaving herself. He was still in the vicinity but hidden, and she waited for a while in the curtilage of the shop. When she moved away, the defendant emerged and followed her down Gloucester Road. She began to run, and she outran him. It is no hyperbole to say that her actions that night saved her life. This pursuit had lasted 21 minutes. That woman has not been identified. Before long, the defendant saw another potential victim who was inside a chicken shop on Romford Road. He entered and stared at her and put his hand.
All right, well, unfortunately, there we appear to have lost the feed from the Old Bailey, but what you were listening to there was the sentencing of Jordan McSweeney, who admitted to killing Zara Alina, and that was in East London in June. We will endeavour to be bringing you back to the sentencing there. But yes, just as we await to be returned to the Old Bailey, I just want to fill you in on a couple of the other topics that we're going to be talking about throughout the course of this show. And, of course, another big breaking news, another tragedy in the Channel, as 4 people have now been confirmed dead after a small boat capsized in the Channel off the Kent coast in the early hours of this morning. Home Secretary Suella Braverman expressed her sorrow at the incident earlier today.
I know that everyone in this House and across the country will join me in expressing our profound sadness and deepest sympathies for everyone affected by this terrible event. I know that they will also join me in offering our profound gratitude to those working on the search and rescue operation. Yeah. That very much includes those who are responding to the incident. Commander Dan O'Mahony and his team are working tirelessly with military colleagues and other partners, day in and day out, to try to prevent this type of tragedy. They are undertaking immensely difficult work, and we should all be extremely grateful to them. Mr. Speaker, these are the days that we dread. Crossing the Channel in unseaworthy vessels is a lethally dangerous endeavour. It is for this reason, above all, that we are working so hard to destroy the business model of the people smugglers, evil, organised criminals who treat human beings as cargo.
OK, so that was Suella Braverman there, speaking earlier in the House of Commons in relation to one of the big stories that we're covering today. Sadly, 4 more people have lost their lives in the English Channel after a small boat capsized. But we're just going to go back now. That feed has been restored to the Old Bailey for the sentencing of Jordan McSweeney, who admitted to killing Zara Alina in East London in June. Let's listen.
Miss Alina reached the junction of Northbrook and Cranbrook Roads at the same time. It was a fatal coincidence. He waited for her to go past and then crossed the road so that he was behind her. He followed her for some distance, getting to within a few metres of her, until she reached number 268, a residential property on Cranbrook Road, with a wide paved front garden or driveway. At that point, there were no other people on the street. The attack was captured on domestic security cameras. He grabbed her and pulled her backwards, one arm around her neck, the other over her mouth. She was dragged deeper into the darkness of the driveway, and it's clear that she struggled and fought him. But he had the advantage of surprise and strength, and he was successful in subduing her. He then parted her legs while she was on the ground, but still she fought and resisted, getting up again. Again, he attacked her and pulled her back onto the ground. She must have been rendered unconscious, because he then dragged her around without independent movement from her. He removed some of her clothing and sexually assaulted her. The security camera on the front of the house does not provide a clear image of these events. He kicked and stamped on her, his movements indicating that these were repeated, heavy assaults. He was not carried away. He had not been overtaken by an uncontrollable urge. It's clear that he was wholly aware of what he was doing. This is indisputably correct, because when he realized that someone was coming past the house on the pavement, he bent out of sight before resuming what he was doing. After satisfying his lust, he proceeded to destroy the woman he had just degraded. With sickening deliberation, he stamped on her. Then he left the driveway, but after walking a few meters, he returned and repeatedly stamped down on her body again, using the balustrade for balance. He searched her body again and left for a second time, carrying things of hers. Still not finished, having walked away, this time further, he again returned to Miss Alina and bent down by her body before stamping on her again. This abduction, sexual assault and murder lasted just 9 minutes. He had carried away her phone, keys, purse, leggings and underwear, and they were found abandoned nearby. He was captured on CCTV at the fair, where the caravan was located, with bloodstains on his clothing and trainers as he returned. Zara Alina's body was found by 2 couples walking past, and emergency services were called. Some of those members of the public have been traumatized by what they saw. The court commends their swift and compassionate actions in seeking help. Miss Alina was desperately injured, struggling for breath, and her life was in danger. All that could be done was done by the medical professionals who answered the 999 call. They tried to save her life on the driveway for over an hour. She arrived at the Royal London Hospital after 4 a.m. and the work continued, but by 9:58 a.m. she was dead. She had suffered 46 separate injuries. These included severe blunt force trauma to her head, deep lacerations to her scalp, bruising to her lips, ear, eyes, nose and jaw. She had suffered genital injuries. The severity of the violence caused traumatic brain injury. She died because of the brain injuries and prolonged neck compression. She had been stamped and strangled to death. The defendant had left 2 fingerprints in blood on the balustrade. Through intelligent and swift work by the Metropolitan Police, he was quickly identified and arrested on the 27th of June at his caravan in Valentine Park. He made no coherent response to arrest. His blood-stained trainers and jeans were found secreted in the caravan park. He had hidden them there in the afternoon of the 26th of June. His demeanour on the relevant CCTV footage from the site that afternoon suggests no cares, no regrets, no contrition. At the police station, he said he was on medication for ADHD and suffered from a split personality disorder. He refused treatment and threatened officers at the station. He made no comment in 3 police interviews and exhibited utter disrespect for the situation he was in, given what he knew he had done so recently. Nothing a judge says can make any difference to what happened to Miss Zara Alina. No sentence of the court can bring her back. The defendant had the physical advantages of strength and surprise. In everything else, she was better than him. She was talented, spirited, intelligent, and kind. Spending the evening with her friend, she had done nothing wrong, taken no misstep, shown no lack of sense. She was simply a happy, healthy woman, living her life in what most Londoners think of as the best city in the world. The defendant has been brought to court today, but has refused to come up to this courtroom. He has given an excuse that he doesn't want to revisit the events he is responsible for. It's agreed that his non-attendance is voluntary and it is appropriate to sentence him in his absence. But the defendant's decision not to come up from the cells to court to hear the devastating impact of his crimes shows that the man who took Zara Alina's life has no spine whatsoever. Murder carries a life sentence. I have to determine the minimum term to be served in accordance with paragraph 3 of Schedule 21 of the Sentencing Act 2020. It should be clear to everyone that this figure is just the minimum, and it will only be when the parole board considers the defendant is no longer a risk that he can be released. That day may never come. The prosecution submits that this is a case in which the seriousness of the murder, considered together with the sexual assault, is particularly high. The defence agree. The starting point for the court's determination, both sides agree, is therefore one of 30 years. Mr. Glasgow King's Counsel submits that accounting for the aggravating and mitigating features and for the guilty pleas, this case merits a sentence well in excess of the minimum term. Mr. Carter Stevenson, King's Counsel, disagrees and urges the court to pass a more moderate minimum term in all the circumstances. In this respect, the specific disputes I have to resolve are fourfold. Firstly, the prosecution and defence agree that the evidence is the defendant was planning to commit a sexual offence, and there is no sign of significant planning or premeditation for murder. However, I do not agree that this is a case of someone seeking what has been described as an intimate encounter. That is far too neutral a term, albeit understandable. Most of the defendant's behaviour in the 2 hours before he dragged Zara Alina off the street reveals a resolve to find and attack a vulnerable female. He confronted or followed several women. I am sure that the defendant intended to sexually assault a woman violently, using such force as required to achieve submission and to frighten her. Although I do not sentence on the basis that this was a premeditated murder, I am also satisfied that he was quite prepared to kill if necessary. As it turned out, he decided it was. Secondly, although he has no previous convictions for sexual offences or crimes of serious violence, the prosecution relies on records of his previous aggressive behaviour as an aggravating feature. The evidence is of 4 specific incidents since 2009 and a large number of incidents of aggression in prison. I ignore the earliest incident provided by the prosecution. But in 2010, his partner alleged domestic violence. She told the police that he had assaulted her, pushed her down the steps, pulled her hair and strangled her. She bore visible injuries. He was arrested and he gave an account to the police largely in line with what she had said. But he excused himself because she had been, quote, going on, and as a result he lost his temper. Between May 2018 and June 2019, he abused another woman with whom he was in a relationship soon after it began. He would slap her, punch her, beat her, kick her in the ribs and drag her along the road. In February 2020, while in prison, he threatened to kill a prison officer who had spoken to him after he'd damaged his cell. He said he would cut off his head and open him up. This sort of threatening attitude and behaviour is his default presentation. Intelligence reports disclosed to the defence demonstrate that on the 20th of December 2015, whilst located in the segregation unit of a prison, he made threats to carry out very serious harm to a prison officer who was female. They also include a report that in March 2017 he became abusive and aggressive when asked to remove photographs from his cell wall by another female officer, to whom the defendant also made threats of really serious bodily harm, including stabbing. He said, "I've stabbed govs before, check my file and watch what I do to you." His record of adjudications in custody shows that he had 223 adjudications between August 2010 and June 2022, 165 of which resulted in charges, 139 resulted in verdicts, and 169 resulted in sanctions. Among them are numerous adjudications for committing assault and for using threatening, abusive or insulting words or behaviour. The Police Intelligence Unit incidents for a prisoner report records 102 incidents for Jordan McSweeney between August 2012 and April 2022. Amongst these incidents are serious assaults on other inmates, improvised weapons being found in Jordan McSweeney's possession, and general disobedience. I remind myself that it is only that which I can be sure of to the criminal standard of proof that can be relevant to the decision I must make on a minimum term. I am sure to that standard that the defendant is a pugnacious and deeply violent man with a propensity to violence. In my judgment, this material is also relevant to the extent that it demonstrates that his behaviour on the night of the 26th of June 2022 was not an aberration. It was a steep and sudden escalation of violence which had simmered in his life for many years. Thirdly, I have to determine whether this is a case in which I am sure that the degree to which Miss Alina suffered mentally or physically before her death is an aggravating feature. It is argued that she is likely to have been unconscious very early on and during much of the attack. That she remained unconscious is speculation, and there is evidence contrary to that suggestion, including the need, as he saw it, for the defendant to return to the victim twice after initially leaving her. She survived 8 hours after the attack. I am sure she will have suffered inordinately, and this is an aggravating feature. Fourthly, I have no doubt Jordan McSweeney intended to kill Zara Alina. The nature of his attack, stamping on her head, and the fact that he returned twice drives me to the conclusion that this was a determined intention to kill. Finally, is there any degree to which culpability for this murder is lowered because of a mental disorder or disability? Mr. Carter Stevenson submits that I should have regard to the defendant's statement at the police station that he has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and personality disorder. As I observed to counsel, the court has no psychiatric report from any expert who examined the defendant. I have considered the report of the psychologist, Dr. Black, very carefully. I bear in mind all the mental ill health identified therein, which counsel has summarised as making the defendant someone who struggles in the community and has real difficulty in making and maintaining a healthy social life and relationships. Despite the brokenness the defendant has experienced, I do not consider that there is any cogent material upon which I can conclude that the mental health issues which he undoubtedly has, or the antisocial conditioning from his upbringing, are capable of reducing his culpability to any material extent. I sentence him on the basis that his mental faculties were such that he bears full responsibility for his actions. The presence of the following aggravating features is agreed: the location and timing of the offence, in public in the early hours of the morning, witnessed partly by members of the public, and the attempts made to dispose of or conceal evidence, such as the blood-stained clothing and shoes. Two other factors which I consider to be important require attention. Firstly, I am sure that the taking of Miss Alina's mobile phone was a deliberate attempt to prevent her calling for help or giving a description of what had happened to her before she died. And secondly, he had shortly before been released from the defendant's most recent sentence. The revocation of his licence on the 24th of June was placed on the police national computer on the 25th of June. In my judgment, he committed this offence in the expectation that he was likely to be returned to custody soon in any event. Apart from the guilty pleas, I find no mitigation. He has never expressed any remorse or demonstrated empathy for the outcome of his behaviour in evidence. He cried at the police station, but this was after his arrest for murder and rape, and it was not accompanied by any expression of sorrow for the impact on anyone else. His licence has been revoked and he has been serving the remainder of his previous sentence while on remand, so there are no days to be counted against the sentence I pass today. I have taken care to avoid double counting. The sexual assault is a Category 1A offence because the defendant used violence and threats and abducted the victim from the street. There was a significant degree of premeditation because he wandered around the area until he found the ideal circumstances in which to commit the offence. This was a particularly violent sexual assault committed at night in a public place on a woman out alone. The defendant removed Miss Alina's knickers and caused injuries to her genitalia, as well as the injuries that led to her death. The sentence for that offence of sexual assault, had I been dealing with it alone, would have been 6 years imprisonment. Taking into account his history of offending, had there not been a guilty plea, I would allow 1/3 discount for the plea. I take the view that this offence is already incorporated into the minimum term for murder because I have taken the higher starting point of 30 years and I reflect the aggravating features of it in the minimum term for the murder. Having been arrested on the 27th of June, the defendant was charged with murder and rape on the 29th of June. On reception in prison, he indicated that he could not comprehend that he had done what he had done. He appeared for a preliminary hearing on the 1st of July 2022, and his PTPH was set for the 30th of September 2022. Prior to the listing, the solicitors acting for the defendant wrote to the court to inform them that they had not received an expert report commissioned from a psychiatrist because the defendant had not seen him. Furthermore, owing to the industrial action being taken by the defence bar, his instructed advocate would not be present. Accordingly, I adjourned the hearing to the 19th of October, and an extension was given for service of the defence statement. The defendant failed, without a reasonable excuse, to attend 2 appointments with the psychologist on the 21st of September and the 3rd of October. His solicitors wrote to the court again to request a further adjournment. When the case came before the court for PTPH on the 19th of October, the defendant refused to attend, and it became apparent that he had not attended a conference that had been arranged with his solicitors. The defence were directed to secure the services of a psychologist who could provide a report as soon as possible, and the PTPH was adjourned to the 24th of October. On that date, the solicitors still did not have a report, and the PTPH was adjourned once again to the 11th of November. In the report of Dr. Black, which is dated the 26th of October, and which was, I'm sure, in the hands of the defence soon after that date, the defendant suggests that he did not remember what had happened, and he could not believe what he was seeing when shown the CCTV in interview. In fact, at the police interviews after arrest, the defendant affected a bored and disinterested facade. The defendant was not produced at the next hearing because he tested positive for COVID. The PTPH was put back to the 16th of November. Despite a direction that he attend in person, the defendant refused to come to court on exchanged. The defence took instructions from the defendant and approached the prosecution about potential pleas, and this was indicated to the court. The PTPH was adjourned to the 19th of November, and on that occasion, the defendant pleaded guilty to the preferred two-count indictment, murder and sexual assault. I accept that the defence solicitors commissioned expert reports to ensure there was no psychiatric defence to the charge of murder and to ensure fitness to plead and to be tried. These were responsible steps in a case of such gravity. I also accept that because of the action taken by criminal barristers, the defendant was not able to receive advice from junior barristers or the King's Counsel until October this year. I reject the suggestion from the defence that because he was heard on a prison phone telling his mother that he was banged to rights, he should be taken to have indicated at a very, very early stage that he would accept responsibility for the killing. He never indicated this to the court until the 16th of November, and at stages, his non-engagement frustrated the work being done on his behalf. In addition, as Mr. Carter Stevenson accepted in his written submission on sentence, he caused some additional delay through taking a belligerent attitude when required to come to court, including telling the jailers on one occasion that there was no point in attending a hearing at which he was required. Overall, my conclusion is that the defendant is entitled to less than the maximum discount on the murder count, and I would allow 1/8. Although given the length of the term I will impose, the maximum discount allowed can be 5 years. Considering all these features, after a trial, the minimum term would have been 43 years. I allow 5 years, as I have said, for the plea of guilty indicated via counsel on the 16th of November, a few weeks before trial. A sentence of 4 years concurrent is imposed for sexual assault. The sentence for the brutal, sexually motivated murder of Zara Alina is imprisonment for life. The defendant will serve 38 years as the minimum term. The court would like to thank counsel and also to commend Mr. and Mrs. Condor, Georgina Woolard and Maria Bergen.
Okay, well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. An incredibly harrowing and disturbing watch and a listen. That was, of course, the sentencing of Jordan McSweeney for the savage, brutal rape and murder of Zara Alina, and that was in East London back in July. She just tried to walk home, and the sentencing there is imprisonment for life with a minimum of 38 years. And as we heard there, and as will have been news to a lot of people, the shocking track record of Jordan was revealed in court, wasn't it? And it may well beg the question, as I'm sure a lot of people will be wondering now, is should he have ever been allowed to walk the streets anyway, to go on to commit such a violent, abhorrent and depraved act? You are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Very difficult to know how to gather yourself from that, but anyway, right. Well, look, coming up, we will hear the real-world impact of strike action on small businesses here in the UK during one of the busiest times of year. I will also ask, is it time to take drastic action to take back control in the Channel after more devastating news from Kent this morning after the death of 4 people when a small boat capsized, making the dangerous journey? That is next. I'll be back very shortly. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
OK, welcome back, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. Well, from one breaking story to another, let's go back to that very tragic case where 4 people have sadly lost their lives after attempting to cross the English Channel in a small boat early this morning. GB News has been told up to 4 more people may still be missing in the Channel. That's after 4 migrants died overnight when their small boat got into difficulties making the dangerous journey across that body of water. Let's get the latest on that operation from our Home and Security Editor, Mark White in Dover. Mark, what is the latest then for us, please?
Well, this search operation has been running since 3 a.m. We're told that it's going to run until at least 9 o'clock this evening now. The authorities are working on information that up to 4 more people are still missing out there in the Channel. Clearly, they've been speaking to those on board this vessel. 47 was the initial number we were given, but it seems that there may have been over 50 people on board this boat. So lots of maritime assets are still out in the Channel at the moment. Border Force vessels, lifeboats, French and British naval vessels, as well as local fishing boats who've been asked to keep an eye out as well. So they're not going to give up the search. Sadly, though, the reality is that after all of these hours, it will be a recovery operation, not a rescue operation. There's just no way that anyone would have been able to survive with the temperatures as low as they are in these waters. But as I say, still 4 people, they believe, Patrick, are missing unaccounted for at this time.
Yeah, indeed. Mark, as you said there, of course, that operation does continue. Sadly, not expected to be any more survivors, of course. And it does come around a year since the last impact as well, doesn't it? Since the last sad loss of life in the Channel, Mark.
Yes, 13 months ago when 27 people died. I mean, that really was a mass tragedy, a boat that deflated mid-channel by the time rescuers got to them. All those on board had drowned. Now 27 were confirmed to have died, but actually the total number was well over 30, and some of those bodies never recovered. And it might well be that we're looking at a similar situation, that 4 people have been recovered, 4 bodies have been recovered, but there may be others, the missing, the unaccounted for, that we never know really the true number of which, and it could be at least 4 out there. It may be that in the fullness of time we get some more indication from authorities from what they've been able to glean from others on board this boat. But if they thought, of course, 30 months ago that tragedy of 27 or more deaths in the Channel would stop the small boats, they were sadly mistaken. It's too profitable for the criminal gangs. The people are too desperate, clearly, to get over this side of the Channel and willing to take that risk, despite there being an obvious risk.
Yeah, a massively obvious risk. And Mark, it comes off the back of yesterday, Rishi Sunak announcing that he's got this big plan to try to stop these small boats crossings. One element of that, I know earlier on I spoke to you a bit about the small boat supply, for example. A bit later on, I'm going to be talking about what's going to happen with the ECHR and all of this. Another element of it that I'm just quite keen to get your take on is the putting people at Tirana Airport. Right now, can you just talk us through that? A lot of our viewers, a lot of our listeners are saying that's basically going to be kind of like the chocolate fireguard approach, really, because people either won't fly out from that airport or it just will have no impact on them whatsoever. Can you just explain to our viewers and our listeners exactly what that really means, that element of the plan?
Well, I mean, all of those points that you raise are true. There's multiple ways in which people can leave the country of Albania to get through Europe and to get to Normandy to make that journey across to the UK. So putting a modest number, and it will be a modest number. If you remember, we got, again, with a great fanfare, one of Priti Patel's announcements about new deals and with Albania that would allow for Albanian security personnel, police officers, to come here to the UK to help identify those that are coming across that have no right to be here, that may have been involved in criminality in Albania. When eventually the officials were questioned at the Home Affairs Select Committee on just how many of these Albanian officials had come across, we understand the number was 1.
Good grief. All right, look, Mark, thank you very, very much. Mark White there will be bringing us the latest. As we understand it, the current state of play, unfortunately, with what's been going on in the Channel is that 4 people have sadly died after a migrant boat capsized. Earlier on, 4 people remain missing and 40 or so are currently receiving treatment. We'll bring you the very latest on all of that as it comes to us. It is yet another tragic loss of life in the Channel after yet another record year when it comes to crossings. And I have been asking you throughout the course of this show to get in touch and just come up with what you think some of the solutions should be. And there's not a huge amount of sympathy out there for Rishi Sunak's plan at the moment, which is to have more forces out there in the Channel, which is to have more holiday camps, for example, being used in order to house some of these people. He says, anyway, to create more safe and legal routes, which would predominantly, I suppose, be aimed at stopping people making that journey, as Suella Braverman called it, an unnecessary journey across the Channel, and to have some people stationed at Tirana Airport in Albania. Quite a few people saying that this is just a sticking plaster over a gaping wound, and unfortunately that gaping wound is in a completely different part of the body, actually, when it comes to that. So they're saying it will have absolutely no impact whatsoever. A lot of people saying that the deterrent has to be deportation. Clearly, though, and you just read the news and listen to the news today of 4 people sadly losing their lives in the Channel, it crystallises, I think, doesn't it, more so than ever, that more needs to be done to stop these boats ever setting off. And for me, that means stopping the actual boats themselves, the supply of these boats. How can it be that the full might of Europe's police services cannot stop the production line of these boats coming all the way through to Calais? I cannot believe for the life of me that we seem so unable to stop the boats actually making it to the shores of Calais, and also whether or not as well we should be leaving the ECHR, making it easier to deport people. And is it now not time maybe to be using people like the SAS a little bit more to go and cut the head off this snake and actually really go after, in I would argue possibly quite a violent way actually, the people responsible for transporting these people over there, the human traffickers. But anyway, we'll move away from that for now. GB views at gbnews.uk. Keep those views coming in. I will be going to you and indeed viewers actually on screen as well a bit later on. But back onto the strikes now. The Royal Mail postal workers began their planned strike action today over jobs, pay and conditions. The strike by the Communication Workers Union coincides with the ongoing strike action by the RMT union. That's on the railways. That's causing major disruption around the country as we speak. We're also going to be facing down the barrel of nurses' strikes tomorrow. Now, I know that has got a lot of people going, and I was originally centring the discussion on that because they've announced actually there will not be taking place various different cancer operations. People did think that those will be deemed to be life-saving, to be urgent, and they are not. We've got paramedic strikes coming down the line as well, questioning the morality of it, questioning whether or not Rishi Sunak is actually doing enough to stop those particular strikes. They apparently did say that if they did agree to meet with the nurses, then maybe they would stop the strike action. As we understand it anyway, the clock is ticking, and he has actually not decided to meet with them. But when it comes to the other strike action, more like the postal workers, for example, and, of course, the transport sector strikes, many businesses are claiming this has just wreaked havoc on their operations at what is normally expected to be their most prosperous time of year, a time of year when they make up for maybe losses incurred over the course of that year, and certainly, anyway, losses incurred over the course of the pandemic. Well, joining me now is the owner of the Hippodrome Casino. It's Simon Thomas. Simon, thank you so much. Great to have you on the show. Have you noticed a hit to your business takings as a result of the strikes, that have taken place so far?
Sadly, yes. But it's all doom and gloom at the moment in the news. But actually, central London is fantastic. It is still buzzing. It's just nowhere near as busy as it normally is this time of year. And you've got to remember, as you mentioned, there's a lot of businesses that have been through tough times. These are the weeks when people make the money that sees them through the next couple of months, which typically are a little bit leaner, and it's essential. And we're good, but we should be absolutely rammed at this time. It's the same for a lot of the places.
OK, I get that, but who do you actually blame? Yeah.
Well, clearly the RMT are not helping themselves, not helping us. When you actually look at the strikers, the unions, this country's been through an awful time recently. A lot of businesses are on their knees. This is the time we should all be putting together, doing what's right for the country, getting it back onto sort of good economic footing so we can actually pay the sort of wage demands that these guys have got. It's not the time to be kicking businesses when they're down.
Okay, so you don't blame the government at all?
I'm a mid-businessman trying to survive. It's clearly government, clearly the unions, they've got to get together. I don't really care how they do it. They've got to get together. We can't be sitting here in another month's time having these same problems. Get them all around the table and leave them there until somebody comes up with a solution.
I must say, I am aware, Simon, clearly deeply sympathetic towards the business owners who are struggling. I am aware of the optics of this, a casino owner with a rather gold background behind him and an area, no doubt, where people with rather a lot of money go to gamble with that money. I do question whether or not a lot of people watching this might actually have a huge amount of sympathy, but I certainly do. Just to say, do you think, though, that actually the people who claim to be on the side of the workers, i.e. the RMT, etc., are not on the side of workers because it means that ordinary people that you employ, people, just normal people, not the high rollers who go into your casino, actually are the ones to suffer?
We have 34,000 people a week normally coming here, and I've got 700 staff. We have people from every walk of life, people just coming to see Magic Mike, just coming for a drink, through to the people who use the casino. So we cover the entire hospitality industry in this one building. And likewise with our staff, these are normal people just trying to get their job done. Some of the journeys my staff had this morning have been awful, and we've had to pay for taxis for them to supplement. And we're probably not as bad being in central London as towns that don't have the benefit of an underground system and a decent bus network. So I think we've just got to keep going, find solutions, and get past this period.
Right, Simon, thank you very much. Simon Thomas there is the owner of the Hippodrome Casino in London, just reacting to the impact that the strike action, certainly the transport strike action, is having on businesses. One of the big questions, of course, that I was asking you throughout the course of this show was for solutions to some of the action. I was focusing on the nurses' strike, and lots of you have been getting in touch, and the mood appears to be growing anyway, so certainly amongst some of you, like Jill, GBViews at GBnews.uk, who really does think that the strike action should be illegal. It's very, very dicey territory, this, though, Jill, whilst I have sympathy for that view, and certainly, as some of the other people who've been getting in touch, to say that they've had issues getting their care. I can sympathise with that. But I'm just hearing through my ear now that we actually are going to return to the Old Bailey, where Alice Porter, our national reporter, joins us, and this is in relation to the verdict that was handed down to Jordan McSweeney after the rape and murder of Zara Alina. Alice, what's the latest there, please?
Hi there. Well, Jordan McSweeney has been given a life sentence with a minimum term served of 38 years. Now, murder always carries a life sentence of 30 years. Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb has upgraded that sentence to a minimum term of 38 years for a number of factors, one of which is the way in which this was a premeditated sexual attack. And the court heard today how Jordan McSweeney roamed around Ilford for 2 hours on the 26th of June this year, very much looking for a potential victim. And there were 4 different women he pursued over extended periods of time. One woman was sort of stalked for around 21 minutes. Luckily, in those particular cases, he was unsuccessful. But sadly, in the case of Zara Alina, she was not so fortunate. She was very much brutally killed. The court heard how she was stamped on repeatedly, and she was very much stamped and strangled to death. And in fact, when Jordan McSweeney had finished his 8-minute attack, he left and then came back twice to stamp on her even further and removed her phone so she couldn't ask for help. And I think it's the ferocity with the attack which has meant that he's going to be serving a minimum term of 38 years in prison. He'd actually only been released from prison 9 days before the attack, and again, that's been an additional factor in the sentencing. Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb described Jordan McSweeney as pugnacious and a deeply violent man, and that he'd had a history of violent behaviour, although the defence did say that he had an incredibly difficult childhood. He'd been sexually abused, his mother had been a drug addict, and he'd had a completely loveless childhood, and therefore it was no surprise that he had descended very much into a life of crime very early on. But the judge presiding over this said that there was not enough of mitigating factors, that he was still a grown man making his own decisions, and that the way he had stalked multiple women, but the way that he had brutally killed Zara Alina and had also sexually assaulted her with such disregard to her, preventing her asking for help, and also the fact that she lay dying for a long time. It was 8 hours after the brutal attack that she finally died, and she obviously had immense suffering, and therefore he's been given a life sentence with a minimum term of 38 years in prison, which will, I think, be some hope, I suppose, for the family, some sense of justice. We heard 2 very moving victim impact statements from Zara Alina's aunt and grandmother in court today, who described what a wonderful girl Zara Alina was. She was a 35-year-old law graduate. She had so much promise in her life, but her life was sadly, very tragically cut short. And we will in due course be hearing from the family to give more of an update to the sentence, and that hopefully for them there is a sense that justice will be finally served. But the case very much raises questions and concerns about women's safety, particularly in London. This comes off the back of Sabina Nessa, Sarah Everard, and this is something that, for those of you watching, there are placards behind me of people who've come in support of the family and want this to be very much a case that raises awareness of women's safety, because as the prosecution very much laid out in court today, she was a woman who was just going about her day, walking home, and she was everywhere that she should have been allowed to go. But sadly, Jordan McSweeney brutally and savagely took her life when it was far too short.
Alice, thank you very, very much. Alice Porter there, just outside the Old Bailey for us. Now, hopefully, shortly anyway, we'll be going back out to the Old Bailey there, where Wes Streeting, who is the Labour MP for Ilford North, so the MP in the area where it all took place. He's also, of course, Shadow Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. We are expecting him to be making a statement outside the steps of the Old Bailey very, very shortly. A lot of you have been getting in touch, and I think echoing things that I certainly felt as I was hearing that ridiculous summing up, really, of events and the catalogue of the history of Jordan McSweeney, who brutally and violently murdered Zara Alina there. A catalogue of offences, a history of offences, and he was out, wasn't he, just 9 days before he committed that attack. And a lot of you just questioning, really, why he was indeed allowed back out and about, and indeed whether or not in this country now things like the death penalty are relevant when it comes to people like Jordan McSweeney. Well, look, we're going to be returning to that story a little bit later on, but just before that, inflation figures have dropped this morning, going down to 10.7%. That's according to the Office for National Statistics, but the cost of living still remains at a 40-year high, with food and drink price rising rapidly. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves commented on the latest figures earlier on.
Apart from last month's inflation of 11.1%, this is something like the second highest rate of inflation we've experienced as a country in 40 years, with the numbers today showing that food prices alone have gone up by 16.5% in the last year. So this is clearly a very concerning time, particularly for mums and dads and grandparents in the run-up to Christmas. And the government can't be complacent about this, because this is also putting pressure on mortgage rates and on rents. And as we go into the new year, again, I know that many families are going to be worried about how they're going to pay their mortgage and how they're going to pay their rent. And we need more from the government to help with the cost of living crisis, but crucially to grow our economy, because without economic growth, it's almost impossible to raise living standards and improve public services. That's why we are in the mess we are in today.
OK, all right. Well, look, Liam Halligan joins me now, our economics and business editor, with On the Money. Yes, Liam, we've been slightly overtaken by events, but fill us in, please.
So, as Rachel Reeves was saying, their inflation figure came out this morning, Patrick. We've got a little graphic here that we can show GB News viewers anyway. Inflation in November was 10.7%. That's down from 11.1% in October. So in November, Patrick, the CPI basket, Consumer Price Index, basket of goods and services, was priced 10.7% higher than in November 2021. And if we move on within that, food price inflation was 16.5%. You see bread there up 20% on the year, eggs 24%, milk 37%, pasta 37%. All these are basic products, Patrick, that everybody needs to buy. I've been saying for months and months and months that headline inflation is not a real representation of the inflation faced, the cost of living increases faced by ordinary people, particularly those on lower incomes who spend disproportionately on food. There's the proof.
Yeah, indeed. And this is the reason why we're seeing things like security tags on butter and all of this stuff, isn't it, Liam?
It's wheat, it's milk, it's dairy. A lot of this is because of war between Russia and Ukraine, a lack of wheat and grain out there on global markets, and also more expensive feedstock for dairy farmers, again, linked to high commodity prices.
Yeah, now, just quickly as well, because we are expecting to go back to the Old Bailey at some point soon, and we don't want to miss that, given the seriousness of that case. But strike action. Now, yet again, we are in the midst of strikes. We're seeing nurses' strikes tomorrow, but the financial impact of the wider strikes, postal workers, for example, is hitting this country hard, isn't it?
Yeah, we know that the UK economy shrank during the 3 months to October, and the Bank of England expects the UK economy to shrink in the 3 months we're now in now, and that will mean a recession. These strikes are hitting spending, and also inflation remains high. Look, that's sort of good news that inflation's a bit less than it was before. Yeah. It might have peaked. That means that the Bank of England tomorrow may not have to raise interest rates by as much as we thought it would, maybe 0.5% rather than 0.75%. But inflation is still near a 40-year high. Yeah. That still means that people's purchasing power is dented. They're not going to be spending as much this Christmas as they ordinarily would do. And among a lot of business leaders, there's what we call, Patrick, an investment strike. Because inflation's high, because there's lots of industrial action, because politics is all a bit squiffy at the moment, they don't feel certain enough to put more money on the table to invest deeper and further in their business. And that's why, unfortunately, whisper it, unemployment still low by historic standards, but is now starting to tick up. We saw that earlier this week.
Yeah,
too.
I heard earlier on, actually, from someone that whilst the number of people in employment, so your normal jobs, as it were, is all right, the lack of people now... Oh, OK, sorry, Liam.
No worries, Patrick.
Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor there. The family of Zara Alina, who was murdered by Jordan McSweeney, are about to speak now outside the Old Bailey after a killer was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 38 years. Let's listen.
A loner and a man with single determination to stalk a woman or women. We know that night that Zara was at least the 5th woman that he pursued, that he followed. We found the other 4 women, but there could have been more. The sentence that he got reflects the seriousness of the crime, what the court thought of how serious it was. 43 years was the sentence. It was reduced to 38 for a guilty plea. It's a substantial sentence. Nothing that can be done to bring Zara back or give her any comfort for her family, but the substantial sentence shows the seriousness and the determination of the Metropolitan Police to bring people like Jordan McSweeney to justice. My thoughts and those of my team are with the family. It was a very good investigation from our point of view, and thankfully Jordan McSweeney is going to be behind bars for a considerable period of time before he is even eligible for parole. Thank you very much.
All right, now I'm just going to fill you in a little bit on this particular case. We are outside the Old Bailey live now in London. That does follow the sentencing of Jordan McSweeney, who was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 38 years. And that is in relation, of course, to the murder, the absolutely, utterly depraved murder of Zara Alina. The judge there described Jordan McSweeney as pugnacious and a deeply violent man. It's in relation to a catalogue of offences. His mitigation, if indeed there ever could be any, which, let's be honest with you, there isn't really, is that he had a terrible upbringing, supposedly, one filled with violence and sexual abuse. Supposedly one of his earliest memories was of his father trying to assault his mother, or indeed assaulting his mother, and that apparently has shaped his life, although I think we can all agree absolutely no mitigating circumstances for the fact that he decided to stalk and then drag off and abuse and murder Zara Alina. He has been sentenced to a life imprisonment with a minimum of 38 years. Well, look, I am Patrick Christys here on GB News. We will be sticking with that story, but before that, we're going to go to our headlines now with Polly.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon to you. The man who murdered a law graduate in East London in June has been sentenced to life in prison and will serve a minimum term of 38 years. Jordan McSweeney pleaded guilty to the murder of Zara Alina, but refused to leave his cell for sentencing, saying he didn't want to watch video evidence of his actions. McSweeney was caught on CCTV following at least 2 other women before attacking the 35-year-old as she walked home from a night out in Ilford. During sentencing, Judge Justice Chima Grubb labelled McSweeney as a coward.
Nothing a judge says can make any difference to what happened to Miss Zara Alina. No sentence of the court can bring her back. The defendant had the physical advantages of strength and surprise. In everything else, she was better than him. She was talented, spirited, intelligent and kind.
Well, as you can imagine, there has been quite a reaction to that sentencing today. Let's take you to outside the Old Bailey in central London, where we believe the family are addressing cameras with their reaction to the verdict today.
I'm a very dangerous man. We have some retribution, but no peace. There are questions to be answered still, and there are lessons to be learned and changes to be made. Zara's life was senselessly and brutally crushed. And today, like every other day, we live with the horror she was forced to face. Zara was the light, the warmth, the bird song, the laughter in our family. We live with a profound loss each day, and each day we are destroyed a little more. We are deeply touched by the kindness we have felt from so many, and this is testament to the power of Zara's spirit. Thank you.
Well, that was a family member of Zara Alina. We understand.
Can I begin by expressing my deepest sympathies to Zara's loved ones, by paying tribute to their strength and resolve, and by thanking her family for asking me to make this statement today. They've suffered a trauma no one should ever be forced to endure. How many of us can say that we too would have carried ourselves with the same grace and dignity in the face of such unbearable pain? Today, yet another violent man has been sentenced for the horrific murder of yet another innocent woman. Zara Alina's future was stolen by someone with no regard for her life or the laws of our land she spent her days working to uphold. We don't know what motivated this terrible and senseless act of violence, but we know the cost. A young, bright woman's hopes will never be realised. Her family and friends' lives forever altered, and more women feeling less safe as they go about their daily lives. Zara's loss is a tragedy in every sense for her family, friends and community who were left bereft, for our city, which is deprived of a talented and dedicated public servant. I'm acutely aware of the question being asked across our city right now. After Biba and Nicole, after Sarah, after Sabina, after Zara, and after the many other women whose lives have been brutally cut short at the hands of men, when is this going to end? There is an epidemic of violence against women and girls. In the UK, a man kills a woman every 3 days. As Mayor, I'm determined to break this sickening silence cycle of violence, condemnation and inaction. Because women don't just deserve to be safe, they have the right to be safe. We've made tackling violence against women and girls a priority in London with new initiatives and investment. But I know it isn't enough. We wouldn't be here if it was. Our city and our society must change. And I'm determined to work with partners to do everything we can to lead the way. My promise to Zara's loved ones, to women and to all Londoners is that as Mayor, City Hall stands with you. And we will not rest until our city becomes a place where no woman or girl ever fears for their safety in their home or on our streets. Thank you.
I want to be absolutely clear that Zara's name will live on in the hearts of everyone in Ilford South, every family across London, every family across Britain that fears for their daughter. Because this shouldn't have happened, and there will be questions that need to be asked about McSweeney and why he was still on the streets of Ilford, able to commit this heinous crime. I welcome wholeheartedly such a tough sentence for someone that showed absolutely no remorse and didn't even have the guts to come to court and face the justice he so deservedly got today. I'll be working over months and weeks to come with the family and with many groups who believe that any woman walking from a pub that I myself have drunk in many times along the streets of Ilford should never have to fear for their life, or let alone to be harassed or face danger. I will be supporting the Mayor of London in all of his endeavours to ensure that this is something that is changed and that our government begins to take this seriously. Our capital should not have streets that are unsafe for anyone at any time of night or day, and we will work tirelessly to ensure that the legacy of Zara is that women in the future in London will be able to go about their business, enjoy their lives and achieve the things that they deserve to achieve. The bright heart and the hopes that were in Zara and her family for her future, snuffed out, stolen, taken away in such a relentless and remorseless way. That should never, ever be something that any family has to face at any point in the future. And we will demand the resources that our capital deserves. We will demand the resources that our groups and campaign organisations that support tackling violence against women and girls deserve. Because this is Britain in the 21st century. This is not acceptable, and we will make it our cause and the cause of the Labour Party that this will be ended, and ended for good.
Well, that was the MP for Ilford South, Sam Tarry, echoing the comments of the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who spoke before him, saying, as Mayor of this city, City Hall stands with you. Talking, of course, about the murder of Zara Alina, who, if you're watching on television, you can see in the centre of your picture, the man who killed the 35-year-old law graduate in East London last year, has been sentenced at the Old Bailey today to life in prison. Jordan McSweeney, who didn't know Alina, admitted to murdering and sexually assaulting her as she walked home from a night out. We saw as well Zara's aunt, Sarah Naz, come to the microphone immediately after sentencing, saying every day we live with the horror she was forced to face. The laughter in our family is lost. Each day we are destroyed a little more. And Sadiq Khan, in acknowledging the safety of women in the capital city of the UK, said, when is this going to end? There is an epidemic of violence against women and girls. We don't just feel women should deserve to be safe, they have a right to be safe. He also said he's acutely aware of women's feelings following a string of murders and rapes across the capital in recent years, and said, as I said, as Mayor of this city, we stand with you. But it's the pain of the family that we reflect tonight after Farah Naz, Zara Alina's aunt, spoke to reporters outside the court, saying the sentencing protects the public from a man who cannot and must not live freely in this world. We'll have more on that news story later on GB News. For the moment, back to Patrick.
Yes, OK, well, welcome back, everybody. We're going to move away from that now and talk about nurses' strikes, because the Royal College of Nursing has rejected pleas to cover urgent cancer surgery ahead of their planned strike action tomorrow. The union has refused to staff operations such as surgical tumour removals and will only cover emergency cancer treatments such as chemotherapy or immediate life-saving procedures. Joining me now to share their views on striking nurses are a couple of GB News viewers. And the reason why I wanted to do this was a little bit like we had with the RMT strikes that were taking place yesterday. I wanted to know whether or not public opinion was turning on this. It's a very, very emotive issue, especially nurses. And I think nurses, of all of the strikes that we're facing, and let's be honest with you, there seems like there's hundreds of them right now, nurses is the one that I think pulls on the heartstrings more than any other one, because I don't know if a bit like you've got elderly relatives or anything like that, it's a bad time to get ill. And I want your views on it, whether or not you think it's morally right, whether or not you support nurses, whether or not you think both, basically, that it's morally wrong for them to strike, but that they should be paid more. And joining me is Gareth Wynne-Jones in Snowdonia and Dan Bryant in Hull. Both of you, thank you very, very much for making the time for us. Gareth, I will start with you. When you hear stories like the fact that essentially cancer care is going to be stifled as a result of the nurses' strike, well, how does that make you feel about this strike and your support or otherwise?
I'll be honest with you, I'm in support of the nurses. I think that they've had a hard time. These people are there for caring, and the last thing they want to do to strike. But do you know what? I think there is a massive problem in this country, and a lot of it's to do with administration and where the money goes from. They're pumping money into the NHS, and we're seeing a lot of that is mismanaged. It's not going to the right places. We need people on the front line, and these are the nurses, these are the people that are caring, and the money's not getting to them, and it should be getting to them.
Gareth,
yes. I really support them.
Gareth, you make a cracking point, actually, because if I just read out some of the stats here, apparently the real terms funding for the NHS has gone up by 39% since 2010. So when people keep hearing about, oh, you know, they're cash-strapped, the government's not pumping money into it, £180.2 billion has been earmarked for this coming year alone. That's £50 billion more than in 2010 to 2011. And that is, as I've just said, a real terms budget increase of 39%. And when you factor that in, Dan, it does start to look as though it is a problem of management, maybe, and not government. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. The management of the NHS is an absolute atrocious. And if it was run like a private company, it would have gone bankrupt 30 years ago. It just gets ridiculous. It's like a black hole. They just keep pouring more and more money into it. But that said, when I was a hairdresser, I used to do many a nurse's hair. And it's not always the nurses themselves that want to go on strike, but they're unions that force them to do so. But they're not underpaid. You know, they earn a decent wage. I think the starting salary for a nurse is £27,000, which is a lot higher than, I don't know, if I went to work for a marketing agency, for instance, 22 grand is a starting salary. So they're not badly paid, but I don't know the intricacies of what the unions are demanding. And everybody's suffering at the minute with this inflation. And again, that's down to government policy of money printing for the last 10 years.
Yeah, Dan, I'll come back to you on that. A series of good points. This is why I love getting the viewers on, because you get the views of real people. And I think a lot of the time as well, people patronise normal people, don't they? And they think that they don't quite understand the intricacies of it. And both of you have just come straight out the traps with some fascinating points there. Gareth, look, I'll follow on from what Dan said there. Do you think you do think nurses are underpaid, do you?
Well, I think they need a fair pay for what they do. Let's be honest about these. These people are working in the front line. People die in their hands. You know, it's a stressful job. You know, it's not like your everyday job. They're dedicated people. I've got a lot of friends that are nurses. I've got a lot of friends that are doctors. And I see a lot of administration problems, you know, in even GP surgeries. You talk to people, it's all about the money. We need to balance that out. We really need to get that money into the front line. It's like everything else. You know, without them people that are caring and watching after the sick, we've got nothing. Yeah, we've got drugs, we've got technology, but you have to have the people that can administer it and, you know, give care and have time. My mother's recently been into hospital, and I'll say she had fantastic care, but she had to wait for hours in A&E because there wasn't a bed for them. And it wasn't the nurse's fault. It wasn't the doctor's fault. You know, maybe the place is not big enough, but we need to address the administration and how these places are worked, you know, because going forward, this is definitely not sustainable. There's going to be people that are dying. We're seeing it all over the country already.
Yeah, look, 100%. And I do think that sometimes all of this gets hijacked. When you look at the actual numbers of people who voted for this strike, it's not as overwhelming as people might have thought it was. I've just had John on, for example, another viewer. He says, I'm an ex-nurse and I am disgusted by nurses going on strike. They are in the wrong job. And Dan, look, I absolutely copped it on Twitter once for tweeting this, but I do think it, OK, and I have absolute sympathy for nurses. It is an incredibly difficult job. I would never be able to do it myself, and I do think they deserve a bit of a pay rise. Whether or not this 19.2% is too much, I think it is too much. That said, the flip side of it is Rishi Sunak could maybe try to engage a little bit more with them and meet somewhere in the middle. But, Dan, you know, the pay structure is advertised online. You can go and find out how much you will be paid as a nurse. Inflation is realistically out of a lot of people's control, and I understand that they're struggling a little bit at the moment. But do you actually think they should be banned from going on strike?
No, I think everybody's entitled to remove their labour. They should be free to be able to do that if they're unhappy with something or if they negotiate. But the problem is the unions, and it tends to be kind of all out, you know, and sometimes, like I've just said, you've got to learn to read the room, and everybody is having hardship at the minute. And like Gareth has just been saying, a lot of the problems within the NHS is mismanagement. I mean, the NHS is 2/3 management.
Yeah.
So that's, instead of medical staff, it's 2/3 management, which is ludicrous. And that's what you get when you have public money that gets sloshed around because people just they're able to give their friends jobs and they have assistants and it's just
I get that.
ridiculous.
Just quickly, because we're going to go very shortly to Mark White, actually, our Home Security Editor, just on the latest from the channel. But I have been asking for normal viewers to get in touch and actually give their solutions to the crisis that we're facing at the moment when it comes to nurses' strikes. Gareth, just reading between the lines, I want to put words in your mouth, but you think maybe a bit of a pay rise and a restructure of the management to make sure we spend the money better. Would that be a fair assessment of your solution to this nurses' strike, do you think?
Yeah, totally. And I think we need to open the conversation. People need to sit down. Same with the trains, same with the teachers. You know, they need to sit down together and not be fighting publicly. Bring people together. We're a great country. We can do this. But we have to give them a fair wage. We cannot expect people to be working for nothing. It's hard times. But it's hard times on everybody. So, you know, the taxpayer needs to have something back.
And this is the thing, and Dan, I think you had a loosely similar solution to that as well. But I'm reading, you know, all on the front pages, it's about the RMT and stuff like that. And you do think, Dan, whether or not actually, like to Mick Lynch, in the list of priorities for people who we're going to have to give taxpayer money to give them a pay rise, would you put nurses above railway workers, Dan?
Well, see, I'm struggling with giving anybody in the private sector, in the public sector, a pay rise because they're not badly paid. Right. This was my point, and where I disagree with Gareth is then that they're paid above the average wage. So, you know,
you just focus on management and not actually give them the pay rise. Well, because there is a case for that, Dan, and I know it seems uncomfortable to say, and I have respect for you for coming on telly and saying it, because they have had 2 pay rises in 2 years, and people in the private sector aren't getting a pay rise. I know it's a definitely difficult job, you know, and there is an argument to say they shouldn't get a pay rise, Dan.
Well, maybe not yet. Again, read the room. You know, you've got to look at the rest of the country.
All right, look, both of you, thank you so much. Great stuff, that. Gareth Wynne-Jones in Snowdonia, Darren Bryan in Hull, 2 people who've reached out to us and found themselves on the airways. You love to see it. Thank you very, very much. Right now, GB News has been told that up to 4 more people may still be missing in the channel after 4 migrants sadly died overnight. We're going to go to Mark White now, our Home Security Editor, who's been at the scene for us all day. Mark, thank you very, very much. What's the latest, please?
Well, 43 people, of course, were rescued. 30 of those had been in the water. Now 4 people died, so we're told that there was a total of 47 people on this small boat. But clearly, in the hours since this rescue, authorities have been speaking to those on board the vessel, and they now believe that at least another 4 individuals were on board that vessel and are missing at sea. Now, of course, this rescue began at 3 in the morning. There is just no way that anybody would have survived in the waters, given the temperatures out there in the channel for this length of time. So it is a search and recovery operation, but nonetheless, of course, the rescue assets from the Coast Guard, from the lifeboat, from Border Force, the helicopters that have been up, the French vessels and local fishing boats are all determined to try to find those individuals regardless. But as I say, a significant tragedy that has unfolded some 13 months after a terrible tragedy in which 27 people drowned in the channel. People then had hoped that this might have, been a moment for pause and reflection, and perhaps the numbers coming across the channel would reduce somewhat, that people would not be willing to make that risk, that the criminal gangs perhaps would feel it was too risky. Well, the criminal gangs, clearly, with the eye on the money, are making many, many millions of pounds on good weeks. And the people that want to come to the UK, well, clearly, they're prepared to take that risk, even though it could end in the kind of tragedy that we saw in the early hours of this morning.
OK, yes, Mark. Look, thank you very, very much. Mark White there, our Home Security Editor, just filling in on the latest when it comes to that migrant boat capsizing. 4 people sadly died, 4 more expected anyway to be missing, and of course that now does become, sadly, a recovery operation, not a rescue operation. and around 40 others have been rescued and remain in varying different degrees of their condition, receiving hospital treatment. It comes, of course, just a day after Rishi Sunak announced in the House of Commons, notably his Suella Braverman, that did not go unnoticed, did it? The Prime Minister taking responsibility for this. Whether or not he'll come to regret it is another thing. He announced yesterday a small boats command unit, an extra 700 staff from Border Force, the National Crime Agency and other agencies will become part of a dedicated task force in the Channel. He says he's going to end the use of hotels for the use of to house these asylum seekers and these migrants, and instead he's going to start using disused military bases, holiday camps and student accommodation as well. Also, some Border Force officers at an airport in Albania, which I think we can all agree will be about as much use as a chocolate fire guard. But we'll bring you all of the latest on that as we get it. You are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News, and new figures show that inflation has come down. But what does all of this really mean for the cost of living crisis? I will be joined by our very own economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. I'm also going to be asking a big question. Did you know the definition of a woman has changed? Yeah, I know. Me neither, but there we are. Back in a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
OK, welcome back, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. Right now, a little bit earlier on in the show, we had our very own Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor, in. We were cut off, but with good reason, of course. There was the sentencing of Jordan McSweeney that we had to cover there. But he's back again. Liam Halligan joins us yet again with On the Money. And And Liam, we're initially talking about inflation figures, but let's maybe park that to one side for now, because I want to talk to you a little bit about the strikes. We were talking about that before we got cut off, so take it away.
So it strikes me, no pun intended, that there's definitely a battle for hearts and minds going on here. I think the Conservative Party is calculating that public patience will end or certainly be severely dented and tested over the coming weeks. I think they're banking that a lot of voters will think the timing of these strikes, while people back people's, the Labour's right to withdraw in order to protect their conditions. Of course, the alternative is the Victorian workhouse, right? I think the Tories are hoping that voters in sort of Middle England, if you like, will think to do this at Christmas, particularly when we've had 2 COVID blighted Christmases. The first Christmas without COVID, people trying to get to their families, wanting to have a normal, decent Christmas, particularly after the tough year we've had in terms of the cost of living. They will think that the unions may lose public support. And so they're hoping that these strikes will have a backlash on the Labour Party, because, of course, the Labour Party is partly funded by the trade unions to the tunes of millions of pounds.
That's what Rishi Sunak keeps saying, isn't it? Your paymasters, your paymasters.
That's right. Labour are hoping that just the general chaos and the general breakdown will mean everybody, knee-jerk blames the government. I'd say at the moment, it's in the balance. I really do think that. I think there's a tremendous amount at stake here, not just, the economy over the next month, not just people's, state of mind and mental health, frankly, and the inconvenience to businesses, firms and indeed families over Christmas. I think it's in the balance which way this goes, because, Patrick, it's 20, 30, 40 years since the country's experienced industrial action on this scale, and it could get a lot worse. Look, this isn't as bad as the winter of discontent in 1979, as we were saying the other day. In 1979, 31 million working days were lost through strikes, right? The labour of 31 million days. Now we're at about 1.5 million in 6 months, so it's a lot less, an order of magnitude. But I do think there are very, very serious political conditions here. And it's interesting the way Labour's playing it. The main people on the Labour front bench, so Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor, Keir Starmer, they've got get around the negotiating table. Of course, we back the trade unions' right to strike and all the rest of it. Wes Streeting, who's the Health Secretary, he's sounding a bit more like a sort of young proto-Tony Blair. He's painting himself as the patient's champion rather than the champion of the doctors and the nurses.
Well, this is it.
And that is a change.
Well, it is a change, but it's also actually quite smart, and it's something that I was thinking about, because, frankly, there are more people, as big as an employer as the NHS is, there are more people who use the NHS than people it employs. And so if you position yourself on the side of the patients, you could argue that that is actually quite shrewd politics. But I just wonder, Liam, we started out with hearing about the rail strikes, OK, fine, then it became nurses, and then we've got posties.
And we've had a few months of on-off rail strikes, of course.
Exactly that. And we've had nurses, we've had posties, we've had border force. I mean, apparently driving instructors went on strike at one point, but, I don't think many people cared too much about that. But, yes. And now I'm wondering whether or not it can be looked at through the prism of just the unions as opposed to the individuals. They've almost saturated the strike market, and that makes it easier for the Conservatives, because they can easily just go, well, actually, we're not going to negotiate with any of them. And when people start to see the economy, which is already by many people's metrics in the toilet, or potentially about to be anyway, people go, well, actually, we don't want to just give in to the unions. We can see that they're costing our economy money, and if the Tories outlast them, then actually they win.
Look, in no doubt, Sunak's already indicated, the Prime Minister, he's going to introduce legislation in the new year that makes it harder to strike. At the moment, after the Tory reforms of the 80s and then subsequently, a trade union needs at least 50% of its members to turn out in a strike ballot, and then of those who turn out, 50% plus one need to vote for the strike. Otherwise, the strike is illegal. OK? I think Sunak's going to raise the bar. He's going to make it harder for trade unions to strike. But he does have to strike a balance, because most people in the British economy, most voters, almost all voters, they have to respect a trade union's right to strike, right? Organised labour is a very noble cause, right? Without organised labour, the economy, living standards can very quickly
But it's if it starts to look like a Mick Lynch vanity project as opposed to the actual...
But even within the rail unions, the trade union landscape is very mixed and varied in this country. Even within the rail unions, the RMT is the most hardline. You've got the TSSA, which is a lot more moderate. Unite, I'm hearing that Unite have actually accepted the pay deal for their rail workers at the moment. I'm not sure that's confirmed, but even if they do, because the RMT guys, there are lots of them in Network Rail, which underpins the service, the tracks, we'll still have this strike action. But the teaching unions are very mixed. There's a lot of shades of grey here, and it's going to dominate politics and economics for the next, at least the next 6 months.
And there is a risk of the likes of Mick Lynch becoming isolated just for that very reason. Liam, thank you very much. Liam Halligan, there, our economics and business editor. Right, OK, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. The Cambridge Dictionary has updated its definition of a woman to include anyone who identifies as female, regardless of their sex at birth. I am now, then, a woman. Your latest headlines.
Good evening. The top stories on GB News. The man who murdered a law graduate in East London in June has today been sentenced to life in prison and will serve in prison a minimum of 38 years. Jordan McSweeney pleaded guilty to the murder of Zara Alina, but refused to leave his cell for sentencing, saying he didn't want to watch video evidence of his actions. McSweeney was caught on CCTV following at least 2 other women before attacking the 35-year-old as she walked home from a night out in Ilford. During sentencing, Judge Justice Chima Grubb labelled McSweeney as a coward.
Nothing a judge says can make any difference to what happened to Miss Zara Alina. No sentence of the court can bring her back. The defendant had the physical advantages of strength and surprise. In everything else, she was better than him. She was talented, spirited, intelligent and kind.
Well, in other breaking news today, GB News has been told up to 4 people may still be missing in the English Channel after a small boat capsized in the freezing waters. 4 people died and 43 others were rescued after attempting to cross the channel. The search operation's expected to continue until at least 9 o'clock this evening. The Prime Minister has asked the lawyer investigating bullying allegations against Dominic Raab to consider 5 new formal complaints. The Deputy Prime Minister is now facing 8 allegations, all relating to his time at the Ministry of Justice. Mr Raab has previously denied the claims. Labour is calling for his suspension while the investigation is underway. 6 Chinese officials, including the Consul General, have been removed from the UK over an incident involving a Hong Kong pro-democracy protester. Bob Chan was demonstrating on the grounds of the consulate in Manchester when he was attacked in October. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, says the government made it clear that China must take action against the diplomats. Those are the headlines. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Don't go anywhere. We're back in just a bit. And a quick snapshot for you of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2414 and €1.1648 euros. The price of gold is £1,458.32 an ounce. And the FTSE closed at 7,495 points this evening.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your daily dose of madness, because the Cambridge Dictionary has updated its definition of what a woman is to include anyone who identifies as female, regardless of their sex at birth. As well as an adult female human being, it now states that a woman can also be an adult who lives and identifies as female, though they may have been said to have a different sex at birth. Said presumably by scientists, doctors, biologists, people with eyes. It has been reported that the changes have been made after editors looked at how the word was being used across society and has created an extra definition of the word, which includes transgender people. Well, join me now to share their thoughts on this is Debbie Hayton, transgender teacher and journalist, and Peter Tatchell, LGBT activist. Thank you very much, both of you. Debbie, my concern would be that there is slightly sinister elements of this, and that actually now any particular chap who decides to can say that they're a woman and use that, reinforced by literally a dictionary definition in order to find themselves in things like women's prisons or less sinister, I suppose, just winning women's sports events.
Well, they can, but they've already been able to do that, Patrick. And you said it before that the dictionary reflects usage. And if the word's being used in this way, then the dictionary is duty bound to actually report it. Otherwise, you could argue that the dictionary is creating or controlling the language, whereas all a dictionary really does is reflect how that language is being used.
I suppose then, Peter, that it is fair enough for the dictionary to actually change it if that is just the way the word is being used. I suppose the question is, should it?
Well, you know, lots of new words and definitions are added to dictionaries all the time based on common usage. And quite clearly, trans and transgender is a term that has wide usage, and many people use the term trans woman or trans man. So it's quite appropriate that the dictionary includes that. It doesn't mean to say you have to agree with it, but yeah, it's just reflecting the reality.
Well, see, Peter, I'll just stick with you on this one, because a lot of people would say it is not reflecting the reality. Just because this word is being used, it does not actually change what a woman is. And is this not where we're on a little bit of a grey area when it comes to the dictionary definitions? I get that the use of the word is being changed a lot because of people, you know, in the trans community, etc. But actually, the dictionary does have a duty to just, I would argue, state fact. And, really, let's be honest, I mean, you know, men are men and women are women, are they not?
Well, look, you know, the dictionary is there, as I said, to reflect common usage and the way in which words are used. The dictionary is not replacing the traditional definition of woman. It's adding a new additional definition, and it makes it clear that it is, in the case of a trans woman, a woman who identifies as trans, as a woman, even though she may have been assigned a male definition at birth. So it makes it clear that this is about a personal decision and choice to define oneself different from one's biological sex.
I get that.
That's
Now,
perfectly reasonable.
Debbie, as a transgender teacher, are you concerned now that the world is becoming an increasingly confusing place for children? You know, when I was 6 years old or younger, I was probably picking my nose and running around, not wearing very many clothes. I think that probably speaks more volumes to me than most 6-year-olds, to be fair. And indeed so much that I've just been taken off camera, but there we go. Debbie, do you think actually do you actually think that it's confusing for children at the moment?
Well, the world is a confusing place, but it's our job as adults and as teachers to explain the world clearly to children, to separate fact from fantasy, and to teach children what it means to be human and what it means to live in the world. Going back to the dictionary is one of the tools which we would perhaps use to show that there are different usages of words. Just to back up what Peter said, though, is that the first definition is adult female human being. That remains at the top of the list. If that comes down the list or it's replaced, that's when I would get concerned.
Yeah, OK. And Peter, just on the wider point of women's rights, yes, there's this dictionary definition now, and a lot of women are angry about it. They do feel as though their rights or their very existence is being eroded by the virtue of the fact that maybe just being an adult human female being is not enough to be a woman. They think there's a lot more to it than that, Peter. Some people would say that maybe people such as yourself care more about trans rights than women's rights. Is that true?
Absolutely not. You know, I've been championing women's rights as an ally for 50 plus years, and I still continue to do so. But I would say this, you know...
To have their own changing rooms, Peter.
Biological sex is a reality, so is trans identity. They're different, they're not the same, but they are two different realities. And I think both are valid, and both should be accepted and respected. I think, you know, live and let live. You know, a trans woman is not the same as a non-trans woman. They are two different people, but they are equally valid, and they should have the same respect and acceptance.
Debbie, I'll let you elaborate on what Peter has said there.
I just wanted to make the observation, actually, that we're, again, three males talking about women's rights.
But that's interesting. Debbie, can I ask you on this? Yeah, but Debbie, can I ask you on this? That's a really fascinating thing. And I am acutely aware, whenever I discuss this kind of stuff, I always feel as though I'm treading some kind of very clumsy minefield, right? But, Debbie, you have described yourself there as a man, right? Would you ever describe yourself as a woman?
Well, I think it's what we mean by description, how we describe ourselves. I describe myself as male because it's a biological fact.
Right, but then this is the thing for me when I look at this definition in the dictionary right now, where I struggle to get my head around it, where it does also say that, people who identify as female, though they may have been said to have a different sex at birth. And that really is the bit for me that question, because it is a biological fact. It's not may have been said to have a different sex at birth, is it? They're born with a particular sex, Debbie.
Yeah, that definition is very clumsy, and although I defended the dictionary's right to reflect usage, the definition they've used is incredibly clumsy. They could perhaps have talked about perception and how people are perceived. Perhaps somebody who is perceived to be female, perhaps, would have been better.
Yeah, OK. And, Peter, just on that note there, as Debbie was making a point there that, you know, it almost sounds like a joke, doesn't it? You know, three blokes walk into a bar, but three blokes chatting about the fact that, you know, what a woman is. But actually, Peter, you know, should you not listen a bit more to women on this? Women who really, really, really do not think that their spaces should be, as they may say it, invaded by people who were born a different sex. So safe spaces, whether or not that's actually prisons or whether or not it's their changing rooms or their toilets or whatever, because there are serious issues when it comes to maybe children as well. I've got to be honest, Peter, I'm not a transphobe, but at the same time, I would have an issue if I had a daughter, a young daughter at a primary school, and a boy was allowed to change in her changing room, I would have an issue with that.
Well, you know, the surveys are pretty clear that a majority of women, including a majority of feminists, do support trans rights. They believe that trans women and trans men should be treated with dignity, respect.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm asking. That's the
But hang on, let me finish. Then when it comes to the issues you've raised, I'll just give you an example. A friend of mine, a woman friend, she works in a women's centre in the north of England. They have accepted trans women in that centre for 8 years with the agreement of both the staff, the female staff, and the women users. They've never had a problem. They vet everybody who comes into that centre, they check them, and they've never had a problem. So you raise hypothetical issues, but the reality is that most just get along.
Well, no, undeniably, but I'm wondering whether or not it's a problem that could be avoided. And I am hearing a lot more cases of people, you know, rape, for example, where clearly it's only a man can rape a woman. It's such because it involves penetration in the legal definition, and then you read headlines about women raping, and it just sounds a bit ridiculous. But Debbie, on that note, if I final word to you, are you annoyed maybe that sometimes people like me frame a discussion about the worst case scenario stuff? Do you think conversations like this help to actually demonise trans people?
Well, I think they're conversations we need to have because we do need to consider all the different situations. And it's good to talk about issues. But quite frankly, in everyday life, my life doesn't involve trans at all. I go to work as a teacher, I teach children, I come home and I make the tea. And that's the reality of life for trans people.
Look, both of you, thank you very, very much. Always enlightening stuff. I really, really appreciate you both making the time for us there. That was, of course, Debbie and as well Peter Tatchell. Right, so a spokesperson for the Cambridge Dictionary has said, our editors carefully studied usage patterns of the word woman and concluded that this definition is one that learners of English should be aware of to support their understanding of how the language is used. The first definition at the entry for woman continues to be an adult female human being. Yes, OK, they go on to say, our dictionaries are written for learners of English and are designed to help users understand English as it is used. We regularly update our dictionary to reflect changes in how English is used. Right, OK, moving on from that now. RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch is due to hold another meeting tomorrow with employers and the government, although there is little sign of a breakthrough in the bitter row. And more strikes are planned in the coming weeks, threatening huge disruptions to trains in the busy run-up to Christmas. But how does this impact the hospitality sector? Because this is it. They always bang on, don't they, about the fact that they're standing up for workers' rights, and I can't help but feel as though actual normal workers are the ones who are suffering the most. They often rely, the hospitality sector this is, on prosperous times of year, such as Christmas. Joining me now is Sammy Ellard-King, who is the director of K&G Hospitality. Thank you very, very much. How are you being impacted upon by the likes of Mick the Grinch Lynch?
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, to be honest, this week has been really tough for us. We've lost 2 big corporate private hires, which amounted to about £50,000 in revenue this weekend as well, taking a big hit. You know, there's 30 plus members of staff that are on 0-hour contracts that won't be able to get those hours back, or equally as well get the Christmas tips at this time of year, which is so important for them. Yeah, it's just the timing of it after last year's.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Your staff, with the best will in the world, can't afford to strike. And can I just ask you, Sammy, and I'm not, having a go at you here because my point is that no one can really afford this. Will you be able to give your staff a pay increase in line with inflation?
Well, that's something that we've had to do. I mean, we've increased our wages with London Living Wage, but, we're reviewing this constantly. It's just a constant battle. We have prices going up for energy, beer, wine, you name it, everything across the board for the whole business. So, our margins are smaller. And, the RMT strikes have now made it even worse for us over the December period. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so if, as I suspected, you would already be struggling with the cost of everything else going up, as it is for everybody. You would already be struggling / find it completely impossible to give all of your staff a pay rise in line with inflation. How do you feel about paying for rail workers to have a pay rise in line with inflation?
Well, look, I respect the strikes and why they're going ahead. There are cost of living crisis across the board for absolutely everyone in this country right now. You know, it's not just the rail workers. So I do respect the reasons why they're going ahead, but unfortunately it's just the timing of when they chose to do it. This is our most busiest year. We were on for a record week. We're now going to be absolutely nowhere near that. And I just feel like they could have done it next week. They wanted to do it now for a big, you know, media bump, and they certainly got that, but they've really hurt the hospitality industry as a result.
Yeah, indeed. And just to put into a bit of context, right, the difficult couple of years that presumably you have had with coronavirus and how important this year was for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's been an extremely difficult year for everyone in hospitality. There's been a staff shortage. We've had coronavirus. We've had pretty much every battle that we could face. And, you know, the last 2-3 years have been nothing like the 10 before that I've worked in this industry for. So to have this again at this time of year was a big kick in the teeth, if I'm totally honest.
Yeah, exactly. And ordinary working people will be suffering as a result of this. Can I ask, who do you blame? Do you blame the government? Do you blame Mick Lynch?
I don't blame Mick Lynch. I don't blame the RMT. I think there is certainly something the government has to be done, but it just seems like they didn't do enough at this point, once again, to help the hospitality industry. So we just seem to be a sector that's left in this alone.
Just when the news broke, it was a couple of days ago now, actually, in fact, it broke on this show, that apparently the RMT, and we understand that some unions have actually taken this offer, yet to be officially confirmed, a backdated pay rise of 5% from last January, a pay rise of 4% from this January onwards, plus job security until 2025. Do you wish they'd have just sucked that up and taken that offer? Some people think that's a cracking offer.
If I'm being selfish, absolutely, yes, of course. You know, it would have helped us. It would have helped us hugely.
All right, well, look, good luck to you. And it's K&G Hospitality, isn't it? And I really do hope that you manage to not just survive, but thrive over the course of the coming weeks and months. Good luck to you. Samuel R. King there is Director of K&G Hospitality. Someone who is surviving and thriving is Michelle Dewberry. And she joins us for Jubes & Co next. In fact, she joins me right now. Michelle, how are you?
Excellence, thank you. Excellent. It's almost Christmas, so how can we be anything other than excellence? It's an exciting time of year, isn't it?
Well, it is, yes. What's going on, Michelle? What you got coming up?
Coming up on my show. I want to pick up these comments that Joanna Lumley, the actress, has made, where she's basically saying that we've all turned pathetic and that we're desperately seeking this desire to be victims. And I wonder, is that true? Are too many people just addicted to the notion of being victims? Is it an excuse for things? Is it weak? Is it pathetic, as she says? Or is that a little bit harsh? I want to pick up a conversation I had yesterday as well on food banks. I was making the point, Patrick, that I think that every day you hear these sentences like nurses having to rely on food banks popping up on every single corner. Is this kind of a situation that is being weaponised right now? Is there a situation or a reason that anyone that's earning above average wage in this country should have to rely on a food bank? So I want to get into what's going on there. And I also want to talk about that definition of the word woman. Is that right or not? And the First Tribunal has ruled now that care home workers that fired some of their staff for refusing the COVID vaccine were right to do so. I found that fascinating, so I want to get into that as well.
Michelle, thank you very much. Yet another rip-roaring show to greet our viewers and our listeners. Thank you very much. Right, you have been with me, Patrick Christys. I will be back again tomorrow from 3 o'clock. There you go. And hopefully I'll be a bit livelier. Thank you very much, everybody who's been tuning in. I'll see you tomorrow.
I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. More cold and frosty weather to come through the rest of this week. There are signs of a change as we go through the weekend. Still icy and, in places, still some snow falling. This area of low pressure never quite made it in. That's got some warm air, but it's not heading towards us. We've still got the northerly winds bringing more snow showers across northern Scotland, although the winds are now easing just a little bit, particularly across Shetland. But with more snow showers coming in here, a mixture of rain, sleet and snow showers for Northern Ireland.
Quite funny. And I thought, we're missing a trick, actually. And I liked what we did the other day about you sneezing. Yeah, but then I guess the reason I keep it separate is to give the impression that we're this
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Jubes & Co, the show that we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking today. I'll tell you what's got Joanna Lumley talking, you know, the actress from Ab Fab. She reckons we've got a problem with victimhood in this country. She reckons we're turning into a nation of pathetic people that seek out desperately something to feel you know, we're over pressure on this is a problem, that's a problem, he's abused me, this, that, the other. Do you agree with her? Are we a bit of a pathetic nation or not? And you know my show, don't you? I don't get into the whole Harry and Meghan thing, so that is not appearing on this show, but what is appearing instead is food banks. You know, did you watch my programme yesterday? We were talking about, you know, the sentence that keeps getting trotted out about nurses having to use food banks, and it got me wondering, it got you talking about the situation with food banks in this country. Has this now all become almost politically weaponised, this sentence, so-and-so needs to go to a food bank? Do you think people are perhaps taking advantage of food banks? And do you think that those people that really desperately do need that level of help are getting the service and support that they need? And the first tribunal has been published today about whether or not a care home was right to be able to sack some of its workers for refusing to have the COVID vaccine. It ruled yes, it was absolutely fine for the employer to do so. What do you make to that? What impact and implications has that got going forward? I think it was a huge overstretch, and still is, to try and demand that anyone should ever be injected with anything. Do you agree or not? And what is a woman? I mean, it's the question that's got everyone stumped, it seems, if you're in the public eye. People used to be able to answer it easily. Nowadays, not so much. Well, a dictionary is on hand to help you understand it. They've changed their definition, or at least added to it, to say that now it can be anyone, quite frankly, that identifies as such. What do you think to that? I personally think it's bonkers, but am I missing something? Tell me. But first up, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you and good evening to you. The man who murdered a law graduate in East London in June has been sentenced to life in prison and will serve a minimum term of 38 years. Jordan McSweeney pleaded guilty to the murder of Zara Alina, but he refused to leave his cell for sentencing, saying he didn't want to watch video evidence of his actions. McSweeney was caught on CCTV following at least 2 other women before attacking the 35-year-old as she walked home from a night out in Ilford. After sentencing, Miss Alina's aunt said the family live with a profound loss.
Zara's life was senselessly and brutally crushed. And today, like every other day, we live with the horror she was forced to face. Zara was the light, the warmth, the bird song, the laughter in our family. We live with a profound loss each day, and each day we are destroyed a little more.
Zara Alina's aunt speaking emotionally after the verdict this afternoon outside the Old Bailey. Well, in other news today, GB News has been told up to 4 people may still be missing in the English Channel after a small boat capsized in icy waters. 4 people lost their lives and 43 others were rescued after attempting to cross the English Channel. The search operation is expected to continue until at least 9 this evening. The Home Secretary says the tragedy shows how important it is to introduce new legislation to deter crossings.
These are the days that we dread. Crossing the Channel in unseaworthy vessels is a lethally dangerous endeavour. It is for this reason, above all, that we are working so hard to destroy the business model of the people smugglers, evil, organised criminals who treat human beings as cargo.
Now, the Prime Minister has asked the lawyer investigating